Okay, thank you all for being here. I'm calling the June 29th, 2022 Lewes Board of Public Works meeting to order. First thing, stand for the pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence. Okay, thank you. So first thing, roll call vote. We've got the entire board here. We have our solicitor, the mayor, and GMB's in attendance. And our general manager and assistant general manager. Anyone have any revisions or deletions to the agenda? Okay. So then we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I'd like to pull the secretary's report out of the consent agenda, just to comment on the APPA conference quickly.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda except for the secretary's report?
So moved. Second.
I just have one clarification. So technically attached to the secretary's report is the approval of the minutes. Do you want to detach that?
I'll detach that, put that
Okay.
back in there. Thank you.
So just to clarify, the consent agenda included the minutes and that is remaining approved. No objection. Okay, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moving on, let's go to the secretary's report then.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that I did attend the APPA conference a couple of weeks back. And as always, they're really informative. I really wish we could all go. Hopefully in future years we will. I attended several sessions. I won't go through detail and so forth, but the first thing, and because we got the mitigation committee just starting up, there's a whole program. This is pretty much just FEMA and HUD information about what they can do and pre and post mitigation issues.
Related to like wastewater treatment plants or
All utilities.
all utilities?
In fact, the entire city. I mean, that's everything. It's
Yeah.
not just related to utilities. And it was interesting because they gave a couple of examples. Two of them were undergrounding power from municipalities. One was in Florida and one was in Missouri. The underground would be pre. So there is ways of doing it, but I think you have to have strong political connections. But yeah, it's a good information. I was talking to Kim briefly. I think it'd be good to have her have this, or unless you want it directly. And I think there's a lot of good information in there. Of course, EVs were a big thing, preparing for transportation, electrification. That was a major topic at several of the conferences. Again, all types of literature that's available on it, about setting rates and planning for your community, that type of things. So good stuff there. And related to that, distributed energy was it related to EVs and other forms of distributed energy. A lot of talk about school buses and that types of things. Yeah, for battery usage. So it was a great conference. The only thing that went bad is like COVID at the end. But they had a speaker there. He was the head of a department at Harvard talking about the backlog in products presently, and saying that that's probably another year before things start breaking loose in the supply chains. And then he expects at the end of that a surplus of things that have been built up for many years. You would have enjoyed that. I'm sure that discussion is supply chains. So it's really interesting, informative, and you get a big picture of this industry. We deal with a little bit of it, but I really suggest if you get the chance, maybe next year to attend the conference, any of the conferences, but this one particularly. So
Yeah, and the other thing is that, and did they do the governance this year also at the conference?
No, I
Okay,
didn't see, they cut back the workshops that precede the conference by one day. So there was only 4 workshops
mhm.
on Sunday. It's usually a Saturday and Sunday thing. So,
Because typically at the national, they do a conference on governance, which is really good because you get to hear from not only the instructors, but from the peer utilities on the problems they have with governance. And that's always informative and it's never repetitious necessarily. So,
that's all I had. Just wanted to,
I'd like to get some copies of that if that's something we
Sure.
can do locally, or I can take it to a print shop, whatever.
of what? All of it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get some.
actually, I think we can download those from
Oh, that's right, from the.
right
PPA.
from the APPA
Yeah,
conference.
that's right.
Yeah, so you can just pull the PDF files down.
Yeah, you check it out. And any other ones that I couldn't attend or didn't attend, if they're interested, you could probably pull them down too.
So moving on, Inframark report.
Good afternoon. All right, so train 2, we're done manually cleaning train 2. It's back online. We'll be pulling train 3 after the holiday. And that'll be the last train to be cleaned through this round. As far as pump stations, pump station 8, the transfer switch was replaced the June 21st, and everything's tested, everything's online, everything's good. Station 8, I think I reported last meeting that the cleanouts were installed by Sprague. Station 9, the wet well pipe replacement and bypass fittings were installed. And then Station 3, we did get approval to purchase 3 T8 rotating assemblies. I believe they're at Fremeyer Associates. Wait for some additional parts for that, and we'll be able to replace those at Station 3. I think that's,
Maybe just for the general board, can you give a condition assessment of what you found when you cleaned train 2?
sure.
Sure. Due to the installation of the filtering dumpster, it showed significant improvement. Instead of 6 to 12 inches worth of ragging material at the top, we were down to 3 to 4. So significant improvement compared to past trains, which is very helpful. And that coincides with the most recent SIP test that we had conducted, showing a tremendous improvement in the overall quality of that one. So that definitely supports the necessary improvements for Headworks.
Great, thank you. That's really good news. Between GMB and yourself, where are we at with the sizing of the generator for pump station 4?
Yeah, I think that's in GMB's court.
I'll double check on that. Keystone, I know, is looking at that, but I haven't followed up with them for a month probably.
Yeah, because I know it's been open for a while and
Yeah,
I haven't heard an update recently, so.
yeah. I just want to make sure it's not like paused for any reason. I know we had some discussion about the piping going back to the county, and that might, precipitate the need for a larger generator. Let me check with them and I'll report back to Austin.
Okay, great,
Okay.
thanks.
A lot had to do with the electric too, because the way that it's set up, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 480 coming in, step down, or is it the opposite?
The opposite, 208
Yeah.
and upgraded to 240.
Step up transformers. Yeah.
On the nutrient loadings, I noticed there was a general increase on the nitrogen. Can you talk to a little bit, what you think the cause of that was?
Sure. Part of that is seasonal changes that take place. This year, compared to previous years, it's been much cooler, which takes longer for the transition from the colder microorganisms to take the place of be taken place by the warmer microorganisms. So it's a transition period that takes place. And unfortunately, your nitrifiers are most effective. They are the ones that take the longest to take hold. So that's where that little hiccup.
So we changed bugs, basically.
Correct. Just like the season of the summer.
Yeah.
Change just slightly.
And they pack their winter clothes away.
Exactly.
We're not ready.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Staying for the pump station 3 discussion. You are, okay.
In the Suez report, the last one, the June 1st, they noted that the TMPs for train 3 had increased. Any understanding or reason why?
That's a train that we're going to be pulling after the 4th of July holiday to clean. So that would be probably expected as a trend. It's been about a year since we had.
Because it seemed like it increased a lot from the prior 2-week period. And I just wasn't sure if something else was going on there.
It's been running more often as we had shut down train 2 for its cleaning. So that may be part of the overall average as well.
And at the last month meeting, we had, I'd asked that you get with Suez to resolve this comment that they always put in their report relative to the oxygen levels and the oxidation ditches.
I did have that conversation with Matt Stapleford. It took him a while to return my call. So I don't think it was before the last report was issued.
So going forward, we should see reconciliation between.
Yeah, we decided that wasn't really in their scope, and he agreed.
Rich got up with Emmett and gave him a list of pump stations going into the holiday weekend to just take a look at, do some cleaning, just in preparation. We usually see our highest demand when July 4th comes around. So
And you said we did get the hurricane report?
yeah, it was an emergency response.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Thank you, guys. I was looking at the budget. I know that's not necessarily tied, but it is the sewer budget that we have. Our numbers, and these numbers are the new rate numbers that I'm looking at, correct, for May?
Correct. Budget. It's on
The May numbers, May 2,
operation.
2022.
For our R&E?
I was
Yes.
specifically looking, yes.
Okay,
Does this include the current rates?
what we're paying right now,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Because I noticed that in residential, we're down 1.93%. In municipality, which you guys always beat the numbers on that. I don't know how. You're down 6.25%. And overall, we're down 2.84% from our budgeted targets.
That's lodging as well as the electric, industrial and municipal and lodging.
Thank you.
Just one point of clarification back on the oxidation ditches and press maybe time. So I understand you're saying it's out of Suez's scope, but is the condition that we're operating under with the 2 different oxygen levels acceptable, appropriate?
We do process control sampling every day. We test for nitrates. So we're basing our adjustments on those. So, the nitrate sample that was high this month, and we're sending 1 sample in for permit compliance a month. If that sample is high, we can resample to bring the average down, but we're only required to sample once a month. So we could show you our process control samples, and you can see, that we are maintaining a normal range of total nitrogen. Well, we just test for nitrates, but That's what we're basing our adjustments on. Our process control ammonia results and our process control nitrate results.
And additionally, we do try and balance out those numbers to properly affect what our overall water quality is of our effluent.
On the sludge, we're at 64,000 gallons of liquid. I would have thought with warmer weather, those numbers would come down more. Is there some challenge or issue that we're experiencing?
The drying beds are open to the elements, and we've had quite a bit of rain. Every time it rains, it sets back the amount of time that the sludge is required to stay in those drying beds to meet the requirements of Sussex County for drying.
What if we shouldn't put something over top of them for rain events or something along those lines? It costs a
I
lot
think
of
it was
money.
explored, but they'd have to be hurricane resistant, so it would have been
Yeah.
a cost prohibitive.
Yeah,
project.
GMB looked at that
Yeah.
3-4 years ago, and it was not cost effective.
So I'm a little late, but it was okay. All right, thank
I
you.
would only add to that, Earl, that when we looked at that, I think it would be more cost effective for you to get the belt filter press that I know is in the works, that rather than
Yeah.
putting the money into
Yeah,
that.
I absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree with that.
Or I can nominate you to go out there with an umbrella.
I could do that if it's big enough.
Anything else for Inframark?
Yeah, what pumping station was that? 5 or 6?
Five.
5.
We
I
talked.
was driving that, you discussed.
Oh, yeah,
that already?
already, yeah, we already.
Okay, no, I was just going past there after that downpour that we had a couple of days ago. And that's when the pumping station is in the middle of the road. And we were saying that not much water goes down into that, but you could see it gurgling down from the surface into that pumping station.
I revisited that station later that day, and there are a couple of holes in the plates for where the handles are and where the latch lock is that does allow some water, but for the most part,
It wasn't pouring in, but you could tell it was bubbling, gurgling down into that thing.
Absolutely. And additionally, just so you're aware, we never reached a high level warning condition of that station. It was able to maintain. It does contribute to some of the I&I and revisiting what type of lids to place, particularly at Station 5 versus 6, may be beneficial in the future as upgrades take place.
That water sits there forever.
And
hours
just for
hours.
reference, that's at California.
Yeah.
Kind of, there's a newer house on the corner, and California tends to kind of become inundated with
Since they
water.
built that house, it's been a major problem. Okay.
Just because I always say, when you look at what's coming out of that plant, nitrogen load, it can average 100, it's at 45. The TSS load can be 288. It's less than 3. Then, what's coming out of that plant is really, really good. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
General manager report.
Okay, so Kimberly and staff continue to work on the audit, the 21-22 audit. I'm hoping probably in the next month or two, we'll be done with that. It'll be coming back for the board. Pilot Town Road, we are going to the home stretch services, hopefully finish up rather soon. And then there's a decent amount of trench repair that needs to take place. A couple of odd ends that still need to take place. And then we will work towards final paving. Right now, final paving is looking to be the 18th. So fingers crossed, no weather delays. Should be about 2 days of milling, 2 days of final paving.
What was the date on that, Austin?
The 18th.
18th.
Yep. The week of the 18th is when that should all take place. That's what's scheduled. I talked to Johnny this morning. The work on Donovan Road continues. I believe actually tonight, is it tonight? I'm looking at GME. So it's tonight. They're going to be doing the manhole at Central Avenue. They're going to be doing it at night for more of a safety concern for the amount of traffic that would go through there. So once they finish Cooper Circle up, really all they're left to do is just restoration and some odds and ends once again. So that project again is kind of coming down to an end. And then we should, start to cool down as far as construction projects in and around town. Other highlights, we've continued to have the long-range plan meetings. We had our kickoff meeting with GHD, which they're going to be presenting on pump stations. We had a virtual meeting with Tim Reith. Obviously, a hot topic today is investments, and as the Fed raises rates, what that impact is on our investments. So we continue to monitor that. There were some topics of dirty water throughout town this month. One of the things that we did identify is the 16-inch valve that comes from the well field that used to be an old raw water line was actually closed and not reopened from when a tie-in had happened on another project. So that has since been reopened. So that was the cause of one of the issues throughout town. And then we also submitted a presentation to the hospital on no wipes in the pipes for an educational purposes. And that is going to be added in as a continuing education for their employees.
How was that received in general?
How was it received?
Yeah.
They gave us some comments back, ways that we can improve it. We made those adjustments and they were validated, and we sent it back to them, and we're waiting for a confirmation discussion, and then we're hopefully going to go on site, take a look, and then I offer to have them come on site and take a look at our facilities too.
So you haven't actually physically met.
No,
You just got it straightened out.
yeah,
Okay.
through phone calls.
Yeah.
So.
For
Any
the
questions?
old power plant, is that building in disrepair? I mean, is it starting to
Well,
fall in on itself?
It's actually a topic on tonight's
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
Anything else from me? If not, I'm going to turn it to Josh on the IT side.
Be real quick. We're averaging, from our security report, against all the firewalls, we're averaging our normal intrusion attempts right around 300, 350, which doesn't alarm me. We did have an uptick in our email active malware being sent via email. We had 13 verified malware that was targeting primarily two end users. Again, they were stopped, and so all the things are working the way that they should. So moving on, I had a kickoff meeting with Cyber, who's doing our audit report. And we are getting the ball rolling with that. We're very beginning stages, just what we can expect. And I have to follow up with them. I have another meeting with them, I think next week. And then we had a collaboration meeting with the city on the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Where we could bounce ideas off each other, see where the city's IT infrastructure sat versus the BPW, and how we might be able to help one another. I think it went well, and we are looking to. It was very high level. We are looking to do another follow-up meeting in December, and we'll probably do follow-ups every 6 months or so, depending on schedules.
Do you have a third party for your system? Then
Emery, who do we use for our side, our securities? Shore,
For the security system?
yeah,
Fantastic.
for your IT in general.
Oh, for our
Sure.
IT, I'm sorry, Eastern Shore.
So you
Technology
have a third party doing that.
yeah.
Chris,
And he comes in, how often does he come in?
He comes in every 2 weeks, but more often when needed.
right. So I thought it was very useful and helpful that would be able to at least sit down and have these discussions. I think the most important thing is having that that network of people, knowing that if you're running into a situation, anything from you have a questionable email all the way up to our server crashed kind of thing, like hardware or something like that, you have a friend nearby. I think that's really, really important.
Are you all running internal diagnostics to see if people click on emails they shouldn't?
Yes.
You guys are doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you or any of your staff would like to see that, I can certainly show you.
Yes.
It's been a while.
We do have well, these guys are still here. There was a lot of my logs at the wastewater plant were tripping or were throwing messages regarding the power. They're really light blips in the system. And we're concerned that it might just be the boy cried wolf syndrome, where because I have extremely sensitive equipment monitoring the electric system that might not, it doesn't tolerate it as well. So we are looking at bringing in nickel right now to just validate that this isn't that this isn't anything to be concerned about, or if it is, be proactive and take care of it before we have a major problem.
That's Megger testing. They're gonna come in and measure everything.
Correct. And the last thing is that we have officially offered a IT support specialist position, and right at the 11th hour, I found out that they accepted. So we'll be bringing on another help desk to help with. We have a lot.
And just, if you can quickly for the rest of the board, you applied for a .gov domain name.
That as well,
So-
yes. That was still ongoing. I actually hadn't followed up with you on that, so that's why I hadn't brought it up. But yes, we are moving forward with the .gov. It is a much more stringent domain application. Most domains you can go right on GoDaddy and purchase whatever you want, but .govs are handled very differently. You have to be validated, authenticated, and it is a lengthy process, but it is for good reason. Potentially, we might be moving our emails to a .gov, but that would be much further down the line. First step is acquiring that domain, and it can take several weeks. So I don't have any further information. I just know that today they called to validate your status. And if I know, when I know the next step, I'll certainly follow.
What is the status?
He can't, he can't divulge that. I did answer the phone, dos for Donya, though. I'll tell you that much.
My application is now denied, I suppose. Any questions from the board?
I will also say the other thing that we're working towards is a paperless packet. And I know there's good things and bad things that go along with it. Sharon's actually been heading it up. It's included in our NISC package. It's called Call to Order. With that, we're kind of at a standstill on whether or not we want to do it as a pilot and see how it is before we acquire iPads for all of you. But if you want to kind of hint at how you feel, I mean, we can use an existing iPad from like the treasurer and see how it looks and how it operates. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to put paper packets together. And I know paper packets are easier, but
Yeah, my only concern with them is I prefer them, except for things like the financial reports or anything that you need to be able to see. I think we're all getting older and our eyesight is not as good as it once was.
Pretty broad.
But even in the old days, I mean, having to scroll back and forth across a page for things like the financials or other reports.
I think if we could pilot, that would be very helpful. I hate being there with both feet and then realize it's the wrong decision.
we'll try out a pilot, see how it does.
Who else is that?
You have ability to type on it and take notes on the page or anything along those lines?
Yeah, you can do any kind of annotations. You can highlight, you can write right on and then you can save your document from the original document. It also has a feature where I can upload like all of our policies. So all you have to do is hit that tab if you want to refer to the resolutions. So I think it'll be good to have everything in one spot.
I just want to say, we went to a similar system, different provider. And we did paperless packets for a while and now we're back to producing paper. So I'm not suggesting you don't do it. I do find that it is wonderful for a number of ways. I think it's great for the public. It's great for being able to say, oh gee, on April 10th, they discussed XYZ, you can go back and find the documents. But I wouldn't count on necessarily getting away from the paper because we do still provide,
What specifically were the problems? But
people are more comfortable with paper.
upset.
I think she called us old, by the way.
So the packet has the option, so I can make it so you guys have the option. If you want to print out your own, you can do that as well. So if you only want to print out the financials, you can do that and bring that with you.
Because the difference between like the PDFs is you have to open up every PDF individually. And then like the notes, you have to save that file then, it's cumbersome versus a paperless package system.
I like to use my Chromebook. I'll be honest. I mean, I get like, they do print it out, but I mean, for me, with struggling with my eyes, I'm able to make this thing bigger and smaller and call up different ones easier, do my alt finds to see terms I'm looking for. I just find it's easier to do it electronically.
But you do that during the day. That's part of your work too, isn't it? You're online all the time.
Sure,
aren't you? So
sure. I'm just saying how
And
I
you're
interact with
younger
our
too, I
agendas.
think.
Yeah.
I think you're a little bit younger too.
Well, but I still cut checks to BPW. My dad pays his bill online. So I mean, there you go.
But what I like about the paper, you can go back and see this page and go to this page without having to jump back and forth on it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Austin, anything else?
You want Austin Donovan Smith?
Oh, I don't want to steal your thunder.
You
Mike.
don't know, by all means. I just want the update.
So just to provide an update on Donovan Smith, so I received, the MOU was recorded by Mike's office. So kudos to Mike because he has been the ringleader on this one. And I actually received the binding commitment letters today for the loan, and those are executed and they have been sent off to DENREC and to DHSS. So
no champagne.
no,
Wow.
no champagne. I
Moving
think we'd have more
forward.
people here if we had champagne. and open bar.
The official update is we are moving forward. And
Yeah.
that is that's the good news.
Yeah, just a second. I mean, Mike, your office did a phenomenal job and you as point man, we would never have gotten to this point without it. And this has been a long.
How many years
process.
has it been? 3?
3, I think. 3 years, but and I appreciate that, and it certainly means a lot. There were a lot of people involved, and I'm happy that we got there. It fought us to the bitter end, right to the point when we even when we sent it off for recordation, there was one more form that got boomeranged back, and we had to finalize. So, but happy to see everything's executed, it's recorded, it's official. MOU is in place. We're working towards the loan and then we can bid and then get moving on the work. So
And the people at Donovan Smith that's, are going to finally get the services that they deserve.
Are they legally citizens now?
Yeah, the residents, 6 of them voted.
Great.
Yeah, because it was May 1st, right?
I will say, last night they had a meeting and they did bring up stormwater management. So there are still in their mind as residents, some things that, as they put it, Lewis doesn't do things half baked. So, where that comes from, Mr. Burnham, or where that comes from, they're still recognizing needs of vines growing up the utility poles, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. But they are, as you said, I think they're recognizing the incremental improvements that are happening over there, and people are starting to take pride in ownership, and so they're great.
That's nice.
Great addition in terms of community.
Great.
Just backing up in the president's report, Austin, Robin, Sergeant Lunday, and DMAC and I have been doing debriefs with the 4 battery vendors. And I think, as you all know, we put that on hold. We did that at the last meeting. The meetings, we've had 2 so far, and we have 2 more tomorrow, have been really good. The debriefing with the battery vendors, both for sharing with them our desires, critical points, and from them of what the current status of both the regulatory, financial markets and technology has been really good. So we've kept open dialogue with them, and they've promised to come back to us as conditions change to let us know what's going on. So what we did was not for naught. It was a tremendous educational experience, and it's just unfortunate that from November to April, things really deteriorated so much in the marketplace.
They were still there at the conference, obviously.
Yeah.
And so what percentage of people that, municipalities that would like to use batteries found that they couldn't because of, is our issue unique? Or is this a portion of the industry the way we
No,
intended
but
to
a lot
use
of
it?
the projects you're hearing about are much, much larger projects. And it's tied more towards the renewable market portfolio and tying it with batteries so that solar is available off peak in those. So the market is still moving forward, but the price of batteries has gone up and the price of all the ancillary goods. But batteries, Austin, I can't remember, batteries are 75% of the cost of the project, I think is what they said.
Yes, I'm almost positive. That's
It was either 2/3 or 75%. So, the lithium market is really what's driving things. And it's the competition between EVs, the battery market, and the instability in the lithium market.
There was a lot of discussion of the lithium market and the sourcing and so forth by third world countries and the availability and so forth. But one of the things they were saying that they're more picky about where they get the lithium, they're looking for other sources and so forth. But the other comment that was made that, at least by one group, was that in the next 5 years, solid states will be feasible. So I don't know what that does to the lithium market overall, but they made it sound like this problem's going to go away at least, or be reduced in the near future. They also,
Yes.
at the same time, said that EVs are going to be comparable to combustion engines in 5 years too. So
And
that could be- that could be-
fusion energy is right around the corner. There are lots of things in the experimental market right now. There's flow batteries, there's non-lithium based batteries, there's air batteries, there's a lot of things, but none of them have been proven to scale or from industrial manufacturing perspective. So maybe 5 years, but that's a long time off. And I think there's a lot of research, and the Department of Energy is spending a lot of money on it also. And they're also supporting restarting lithium mines in the US.
Mhm.
Is a solar component one of their requirements?
depends on it's not necessarily a requirement.
Yeah.
It's more of there's a benefit in some instances to have solar coupled with a battery. But what they had kind of alluded to us, it's a 1-to-1. So if you're putting in 20 megawatts of battery, they want 20 megawatts of solar. Well, a megawatt at 7 acres is about a megawatt, I believe.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
you start doing the math on it, and it's not really feasible to spend
Right.
26 million on a piece of property to put solar on it.
Mhm.
And they realize that. So it's kind of unique to Lewis, but it's been good to kind of debrief with them and have them explain, on their side how they got to where they were.
And the other tie is that for federal tax credit purposes, a battery, well, PGM does not give you any credit for batteries. Other ISOs do. New York, New England, Texas do. So federal tax credits, you have to go this 1-to-1 sizing for your battery with renewable, whether it's wind or solar. And that helps the financial side of the market, obviously. Since we were not doing that, we were going to put a 10 or 20 megawatt battery in. but not tied to 10 or 20 megawatts worth of solar or wind,
Okay.
you lose that tax benefit. So it's still a market that is developing.
President, do you have any insights on when to look at this harder or what to look at or timing? Did they give any kind of?
As far as batteries are concerned?
Yeah.
No. I mean, this, of course, in the exhibit hall, the batteries were still pushing it.
Yeah.
But in the DERS discussions, they were pretty optimistic, I mean, about the future of the batteries and so forth. But I guess that's why I'm asking what's unique to us. And just as you said, it's the combination more than just the battery itself.
Yeah, and the fact that we're in the PGM market, and matter of fact, some of the battery vendors, their major projects are all in New York and New England, because the ISO markets up there are more supportive. PGM is behind on this.
All right, thank you.
And the last thing is that there was a DMAC meeting last Wednesday,
Joint council briefing.
joint council briefing, and I would encourage everyone in the future, the regional meeting is going to be coming up in August, September. They're going to DMAC, meeting with our peers in Delaware, and hearing their report outs is very helpful.
We talk about the annual meeting this September.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and we went to joint council briefing,
Yeah, you're
which
right,
is usually
right.
just talks
Yeah,
around.
I was signed up for that and then
Yeah.
couldn't go.
Okay. So, presentation, GHD on the pump stations. We have GHD on the web. I'll turn it over to Tom.
Okay, thank you. Let me just reshare my screen.
So just to add context, so what the board did is that it was a kind of a two-parter. We had the headworks taking a look at, and then we also major pump stations, which included 5, 4, 8, and 3. Am I missing one? Is that it? I think it was
I don't read all that stuff. if you don't
5,
understand, so
5,
that's
4,
important.
8, 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just those 4. I'm losing my mind.
It's those 4.
Yes, so
None of which
this is a culmination of all the work that they put into doing the condition assessment so that we can kind of have a path forward, and it goes in line with the headworks and wastewater treatment plant funding that we seeked earlier this year, that GMB is working on bidding documents for.
Good. So I'll take it over from here. Good afternoon. Thanks for having GHD come in and do this presentation to the board. This is the phase 1 condition assessment for the major pump stations for the city. For those of you that don't know us, my name is Jeff Sturdivant. I'm a vice president and a technical director with GHD, and served as the project director for this project. And Tom served as the project manager for the project. We're going to go quickly through the agenda and then the scope of the work, and then Tom will turn it over to Tom, and he'll take you through the details and all the work he did. As we discussed earlier, it's an overview of we did a scope of study, an overview of the condition assessment findings. For this phase, we chose 4 of the largest pump stations for the city that we thought were the most important to the network. So that was lift station number 3, 4, 5, and 8. We did a preliminary list of capital improvements for each one of those pump stations. And we also took a look at the SCADA system and made general comments and recommendations for where that stood against other utilities and state-of-art systems that we're seeing in the world today. So next, Tom. Just a quick overview of the scope of study. We took a look at all the available information provided by the Board of Public Works. I think Austin spent a lot of time sending us as-built and piping systems and networks to us to review. We did site visits to the critical pump stations. in accordance with the local operations team in Austin. That included visual inspections, looking at the bypass pumping capabilities. And also we knew that there was a lot of issues with excessive rags, which are causing clogging issues and overflows at some of the stations. So one of the mandates we were looking at was if we could get a screening or a comminutor into each one of the primary pump stations, if we continue to have this level of excessive ragging in the system. We did a discussion of general reliability of each station and facility elevation with respect to flood elevations and other operational concerns with BPW's operations team. And from all this information, we collated I think that was an 8-week period. We went together and went back to the office to put together a preliminary engineering development report, which talks about reviewing reliability, putting together all the information we learned, discussing clogging issues and ways to mitigate that, an analysis of each one of the station's capacity, especially with respect to current average and max day flows and expected growth. We actually found some revelations in that review. And we ended up developing an overall condition assessment for each station and the ancillary facilities and equipment. So from that, we developed a recommended list of improvements for each pump station and put together some preliminary capital estimates that were good for last fall or winter when we did this. But as we know, supply chain issues, those prices may not be as accurate as we had expected them to be last winter. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom to go through the details. Tom?
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tom Biaggioli, GHD project manager for this work. So as Jeff said, I'll take you through some of the more detailed findings and recommendations of the report. And I'll start just by giving an overview of the condition assessments as we rated it at each of the sites. So you see a few graphics here on the right-hand side. We got a summary table of the condition assessment at each of the critical pump stations broken down into asset group and then with overall scores for each station. And just for clarity, condition assessment of 5 means it's very poor, close to failure, whereas a condition assessment of 1 is as new. So the higher the score, the worse the condition. In the report, we go into quite a lot of detail on some of the specifics for each site, but for the purposes of today, I'll just give some general overviews. So the pump station structures themselves, the reinforced concrete, were found to be in a good to fair condition throughout. We noticed some occasional damage to finishes and other things, but we didn't notice anything that we believe is major structural issues that needs to be addressed at any of the sites. Pumps and motors were generally in a fair physical condition, but as Jeff has already noted, and as I think everyone is aware, there are a lot of issues with ragging and clogging and other solids related issues on the site, which do cause operational performance issues at the pumps. Piping and valves generally in a moderate condition. There were some fairly isolated instances of corroded parts that need to be swapped out. In terms of HVAC and forced ventilation, at all of the sites that have forced ventilation, we found that at the time of inspection, it wasn't working. And it's really the only asset category that was consistently poor across all the sites where we rated it. And we undertook just a visual assessment of lighting, electrical and controls, and generally found that everything appeared to be in a good to moderate condition. So that's an overview of the condition assessment. If there are any questions at any stage, please let me know. I'll be happy to stop and take those. But if not, I'll move on to recommendations. So starting with lift station number 3, and these are the capital works we recommended, and I'll go on to the operation and maintenance recommendations shortly. So first of all, replacement of the existing pumps. So they are old, they are beyond their expected design life. And we're aware that this is a project that has already been scheduled by the Board of Public Works. We do have a recommendation here that before new pumps are specified and selected and installed, that a planning study is undertaken to really get a firm grasp on what the future peak flows are are going to be at this pump station. We're aware that a significant amount of development is planned within the collection network upstream of lift station 3. So we would, if it hasn't already been completed, would recommend that a planning study is done just to make sure that you're sizing for the future. Assuming that a like-for-like replacement does proceed, or similar size pumps are installed, because of the size of these pumps, I believe they're the largest on the collection network. This site actually doesn't see as many of the clogging and blockage issues that you get elsewhere. And so we haven't made any additional recommendations to deal with ragging at this site. I'll get to the cost estimate shortly. Some other items here. I'm just going to pick out the main items for the purposes of today. But we're recommending the application of epoxy lining system to protect the wet well concrete, specifically from H2S exposure. And another key item is installation of a T and valving to enable bypassing of the wet well. And you can see an indicative figure here on the right-hand side. So I think you're aware the access to the wet well at the moment is within Pilot Town Road. So any bypassing, any pumping out of there is quite a serious undertaking. We have some other recommendations here related to access covers and ladders, doors, relatively minor stuff. The other key recommendation here is to install an odor control package unit to mitigate odor from the wet well. There are a lot of properties nearby. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the forced ventilation system at this site wasn't working at the time of inspection. As with all the sites, we provided a preliminary capital cost estimates, and these are intended to be robust cost estimates for budgeting purposes. So we do apply a contingency of 35% to our estimated construction costs, and we have an allowance in there for engineering, administration, and other fees that you may need in order to take this from concept to delivery. And the budget estimate that we generated at this site is 640,000. And as Jeff noted, that is in 2021, early 2022 dollars. And again, if there are any questions, please let me know, but otherwise I'll keep working through. So those are the capital works. In terms of operation and maintenance, a few items here. The main one is clearance adjustment. So adjusting the space between, adjusting the offset between the wearing plate and the impeller, which is a fairly routine task to optimize performance and minimize clogging. And then some more routine structural things, so checking that slab drains are working and ensuring that all the conduit penetrations are sealed. Moving on to lift station number 4. So of all the critical pump stations, this is perhaps the most critical. It is the downstream point of the collection network south of the canal. So it takes the majority of the flow from within the collection network. And a major issue, which I think has recently been resolved here, or one specific clog was resolved, is clogging due to wipes and solids getting stuck in the suction piping. And on that basis, we are recommending that grinders are retrofitted into the wet wells. Based on the concept level review that we completed, we do believe that it would be feasible to retrofit them within the existing structure. And that's going to be important to break up solids, rags, wipes before they get into the suction piping, which very recently led to a major clog, which meant the wet well had to be bypassed for an extended period of time. As well as installation of grinders upstream of the piping, we recommend replacement of the existing pumps. And this is really a capacity issue. And when I say pumps, I mean the whole pump set. It's also the motors, the controls, and the valving. Through our review of the high-level flow rates from the site, and also a review of the pump duty points and the pump curves, it's our understanding that in order to convey the peak flows coming through the site, both of the pumps at the station need to be operational. So it's a duty or a duty assist configuration. That's not it's not resilient. It doesn't give you a robust pump station. And for such a critical node on the network, we would recommend that you get more powerful pumps in there so that you can convey the peak flows with one unit out of service if required. And again, I'll pick out some of the major recommendations of the other items. Again, applying a lining system to the wet well interior, and doing some relatively minor upgrades, repairs to the building.
Can you explain the forced ventilation system? And obviously the broken window didn't help that enough.
Yeah, so at the time of inspection, the forced ventilation system just wasn't functioning. So we actually visited the site twice. The first time that we went there, it actually wasn't safe to go down into the lower levels to inspect the pumps because the ventilation system wasn't working. Now, I don't know if that has since been repaired, but at the time of inspection, that wasn't operational.
Thank you.
Capacity issue. When you said,
sorry, pardon me.
One of the issues you said was to deal with the capacity issue. Could you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in order to convey the peak flows that come out of the collection network upstream of lift station 4, there are 2 pumps at the pump station at the moment, and they have to both be operating in order to pass those flows. So you are able to convey the peak flows, but you don't. But at that time, you don't have any redundancy. You don't have any resiliency at the station. And for a critical pump station on a collection network such as this one, we would always recommend that the station is designed to pass the peak flows with 1 unit out of service. So either 2 more powerful pumps so that you can just operate with 1 pump and have a standby, or if there's space, have a redundant standby pump in there for peak times.
And is that redundant pump in there in your total math there?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So we've costed it on the basis of getting 2 more powerful pumps so that you can operate in a duty standby configuration. And yeah, the project budget estimate in this case is just under $1 million. In terms of O&M, similar to the previous, similar to LS3, so clearance adjustment. The second bullet point was really more relevant while the wet wells being bypassed and the covers were removed to get the temporary pumps in place. But now that that work's done, hopefully there is less of a risk in terms of pedestrians in and around the open wet well, and again, sealing below grade conduits. So to lift station 5 now. I think 2 really key recommendations here. First one is to install an external valve vault, which we're showing here in green on the schematic in the bottom right-hand corner. And there are 2 parts to this. One is in the existing pump station configuration. It's a submersible wet well configuration. So all the isolation valves and the check valves are all within the wet well. They're difficult to access and exposed to flows from the network. So we recommend bringing those out of the wet well and into a dedicated valve vault. And that valve vault would also be able to house a bypass T and valving so that you can bypass the pump station to carry out any major repairs on the pumps themselves. The other major observation here was that the pump guide rails and a lot of the ductile iron piping within the wet well was we could see visually that it was heavily corroded. So we recommend that is swapped out as well. As with all the sites, we recommend a lining system to protect the wet well interior concrete. And I think another key item here, which has been discussed earlier in the session today, is that this area is the finished grade of the road is below the flood elevation for the area, and there is stormwater ingress into the wet well. And although it may be a relatively low rate of ingress, we would recommend replacing the existing access covers with submersible covers to cut down on the infiltration, particularly during major storm events or periods of prolonged flooding. Also, underneath the existing access covers, there's no fall protection, which is a potential maintenance hazard, or is a maintenance hazard. We have some other recommendations here. The first 4 bullet points relate to really providing a more robust arrangement for your control panels, conduits, electrical junction box, to bring them up to what we believe would be industry standard. At the moment, there are some exposed wires, and the cabinet itself is not in a particularly good condition. And the other major recommendation is actually to install a ventilation system and odor control unit at this site. As I think everyone's aware, there are a lot of residential properties nearby. And although there may not be a lot of odor complaints at the moment, we would recommend having that in place. And the budget capital cost estimate for this site is 390,000.
Tom, could this all be done in the same easement or right away?
That is a good question. I'll have to take an action on that and confirm. Note of that.
It looks like with the sketch, it might come into the lot more.
Charles, this is the area of the flood study, right?
Yeah.
Is there going to be any effect to this and that?
This is the pump station that Press was talking about earlier.
Exactly where it is.
California.
Yeah, I mean, we just got approved for the planning grant, so that beach side stormwater management study is just kicking up. Certainly, this is an area of interest. We all know that. So I don't know what the final recommendation will be stormwater wise for this area, but yeah, it's got to be incorporated into the thought process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And then O&M recommendations. So we're aware that the existing Myers grinder pumps, or at least one of them, was recently rebuilt to make some repairs following consistent clogging issues. We just recommend that continue to monitor that pump. And if you continue to have issues with clogging, we've spoken to the supplier Flight, who have a proprietary product, which they call the N-type model pump with an adaptive impeller. And that's an impeller that's able to move within the pump casing to free any blocked rags, wipes or debris and keep it moving. And that's installed consistently across the area, and it's been proven to operate very well. So if you did continue to have problems, we would recommend switching to that system. And if you did so, our estimated budget cost to do 2 pumps with our budgetary uplifts for contingency, etc., would be $50,000, and that's not included in the existing capital cost estimate that I showed on the previous page. That would be additional work.
So when you looked at this, so there's ways to fix a pump station, obviously, and multiple ways to do it. But then there's the technology that we have at the wastewater treatment plant. Does this take that technology that we have into consideration when you talk about the kind of pumps that you're recommending?
It does specifically at the sites where we have recommended the installation of grinders. We checked with the manufacturers, with the suppliers, to ensure that any materials that would come out the downstream end of those grinders and then be passed on to the treatment facility would still be caught by the existing screens or the specification of the screens that are at the headworks of the wastewater treatment facility. If that makes sense. So where we have recommended additional mitigation measures to break up solids and rags upstream of the treatment facility, we have checks that the flows going into the treatment facility would still be compatible with your existing equipment. So I think that's a long way of saying yes.
And just to push it a little bit further, so when it comes to the technology they have in the plant, is there yet a better solution than what you're recommending?
In what sense? At the pump stations or at the headworks?
Pump stations.
I'm
just trying to understand, is there a better technology for the grinder pumps that won't give us some of the challenges that we have in the wastewater treatment plant?
Well, this is something that actually we discussed as part of the other part of this overall project, which was looking at the headworks. We believe that a lot of the issues you had at the treatment facility is actually due to the recycling of solids within the headworks of the treatment facility. Of course, exacerbated by the high rag loading and solids loading from the network. But we believe it's primarily due to issues within the treatment facility itself.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and so just to confirm, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that not all grinder pumps are created equal, and these pumps are going to grind into larger size, so they will get caught by the 5 mil, 2 mil screen downstream versus grinding them into a fine fiber.
It reconnects.
Correct. Yeah.
But I would also say that, when we were doing this study, we talked about really looking at the types of suction lift pumps there, and they actually, the pumps come with a cutting mechanism on the impeller, and that once we upgraded all the plants to that Eradicator solids management system and made sure we kept the tolerances where they need to be between the impeller and the volute, that there might be an opportunity for the BPW not to install grinders or screens at the stations. So that could be considered a phase one. And for some of the primary stations where we've had problems before, if the BPW is so inclined at that point that they just really want to mitigate or minimize the chance of further clogging there, we could install a grinder there, or we could actually look at putting a screen in one of those stations and remove it. But the question about, hey, if we grind it up more, will it get through the screening systems at the plant? It's obviously a risk, but we do believe that the really, what is it, a 2 millimeter screen, the secondary screen there, Tom, should be able to pull that material out if it's operating correctly.
And in fact, even the 5 mil initial screen, the cut up solids that would come out of the grinders that we're recommending at lift station 4, for example, should be extracted on the 5 mil screen. So before it even gets to the 2 mil.
Does that help add context to it?
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we go up to lift station 5. And finally on to lift station 8. So the recommendations here are similar to lift station 4. And again, this really is another critical node on the network. It's the downstream node of the collection network north of the canal. It's one of the 2 pump stations that goes directly to the treatment facility. And again, same approach here. We've recommended installation of grinders upstream of the suction piping. And again, we've had that same conversation that we just discussed to ensure that anything that comes out of those could be picked up on the headwork screens. We recommend retrofitting the Eradicator solids management systems, which Jeff just referred to, is something that can be retrofitted to existing pumps as well as installing new pumps, which again should help to keep the pumps clear of solids and ragging. And then there's some smaller items. So replacing the seal on one of the pumps, you can see in the photo on the right-hand side that previously there was an issue there. There's an issue with the check valves. Again, applying a lining system to the wet well concrete and installing an alarm system. And then some other recommendations here, which are really more to do with finishes, doors, and access. I think the key item here is installation of air release valves on the discharge force main. As far as we can tell, unless they're out on the network, I mean, you can see here, this is the high point and there are no air release valves. And the budget estimate for the capital works for this site was at 560,000. In terms of the O&M recommendations, this site, we noticed a couple of things, specifically that based on the duty point of the pump, as was advised by the pump supplier from the original order, that duty point would give you very high velocities in your downstream force mains. So we would recommend looking into the flows that you actually expect to see from the collection network, and then adjusting that pump operating point to suit, or alternatively, you could utilize VFDs to manage the duration of high velocity flow. We noted here to commission a structural survey. As I noted earlier, we didn't identify anything that we believe is a sign of a significant damage to the key supporting structures, but there was some damaged brickwork above grade at this site, and it is worth just getting that checked out to make sure there's nothing more significant, for example, settlement of the major structure below. These pumps are only 10 years old, so they are still within their expected operational life. So as always, we recommend continually monitoring them. And if you do have problems, if you keep having problem with the seals, or if wear components tend to keep breaking, we'd recommend replacement of those wear components. And if it's on a like-for-like basis, the estimated budget cost of those would be 75K. And again, that's not included in our current budget estimate for recommendations. Again, clearance adjustment and sealing of low-grade conduits. Similar to other sites.
So the 75, never mind, got it. Got it.
Okay. So here, just a summary table to show you the preliminary capital cost estimates. And again, I think we put these together December, January, just gone. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, with the current market conditions, yeah, there may be some variation, but we do allow fairly robust contingencies. So the total recommended schedule of works of just over 2.5 million. Any questions on that before I just give an overview of the SCADA?
Austin, if the pipe under the canal gets replaced, is there any ripple effect of the proposed replacement that would affect pump station 4 or 8?
Water pipe?
Yeah.
That would, the new water line would affect this.
Okay. Okay, and we also looked into the existing SCADA system. And I'll provide a summary of our findings now. So at the moment you have the point watch system, which is in place for each of the remote pump stations, and it gives mock SCADA capabilities. So the operators can monitor and receive alarms on their phones, but they can't control remotely. Point watch is used for pump cycling, and actually also used as a mapping tool, just as a way of finding pump stations. And through speaking with Inframark, we've noted the following key issues. So there's no flow meter data for stations, even for the stations that have flow meters. I believe there are only estimates based on pump run times. There are regular issues, and this is really the key point. There are regular issues with signal coverage at the remote sites across the network. And there have been several instances where alarms have gone off, for example, indicating high level conditions, should be showing high level conditions and call out low level conditions, and vice versa. And when you do have issues with this system, the BPW does not currently have a secondary method of communication for the pump stations. And here's a typical interface screenshot. So our general recommendations here, and the way I'm presenting it here really is at a high level, but there's more discussion in the report. But the reliability of the existing cellular-based system is not in line with current best practice, and that's really due to the issues with signal strength that you consistently see. And if there is a drive to improve the reliability and the capability of the system, we would actually recommend completing a detailed communication study, really to get into that and find an optimal system. And since the issues reported at these 4 critical pump stations appear to be network-wide issues rather than specifically these sites, it's recommended that study is undertaken with a view to developing a recommended design standard for the wider SCADA system. So you would outline the requirements for all current and future pump stations, and it would help you form the basis of design for any site-specific upgrades to existing sites, as well as any future either new sites or upgraded sites. And, so, Jeff, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add there.
I think that some of these recommendations are the BPW should strongly consider. We are seeing quite a few municipalities take a look at their SCADA system and really develop a design standard for that. It's being widely done in the industry, and there really are better technologies out there. And so really should be undertaking that. And as we complete phase 2, I'd make a recommendation that that, with the results of that, maybe the BPW consider developing design standards for their pumping stations to make sure that they're getting a consistent pump station every time they do upgrades to one of them or build a new one. But that's about it. Are there any questions on the report or recommendations?
And maybe this is the way the numbers were listed, but if you were to pick the top 3 things to do, SCADA included, where would you put where would you put the money first?
LS4.
Yeah, in general, LS4 is the most critical, followed by LS8, being the 2 downstream nodes north and south of the canal.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you say 4 and 8?
Yes.
Okay.
And at the same time, I'd be taking a careful look at what improvements are going to be done at LS3 to make sure that we're not doing incremental improvements to that station to accommodate the new development in the city. That's one methodology to deal with that. Another methodology is that there are some shortcomings of that station. The wet well is in the middle of the road and things like that. Do you take the opportunity at this point to say, we can do these smaller improvements, or let's go ahead and upgrade that facility and move the wet well out from under the road? Because, if there's an issue with that wet well, you're going to shut that road down to repair it. And that's not, we see that for small pump stations, but this pump station is not that size. It's a pretty good size facility for the BPW.
So just to kind of go off that conversation we've already been had, we'll essentially have 2 proposals in front of you. One is to line the existing wet well, replace the pumps, etc. The second option is to actually relocate the entire wet well out of the road and put it kind of off to where the existing wet well is, or adjacent to the existing wet well, to get it outside the road.
It'd be on the marina's property?
Yes.
So just so LS3 is the one that's in the middle of Pilot Town Road. About
Correct. Yeah.
Correct.
way down. So, and it is dead center in the road.
You have flow coming in from both sides, both directions. With 2 manholes on either side, they come in, force main comes out, runs down. So the proposal that we'll talk about later is to actually add bypass and isolation valving in, which can be utilized in any circumstance, whether you go with relocating the wet well, keep the existing location.
So to continue the theme, so if 4 is first, arguably, 8 would be second, 3 would be third. What would be 4th? Including SCADA.
Well, hold on, just 3,
5, I believe.
3 we're already working on though.
No, I was just curious what their prioritization was.
So
Right, but I mean,
Yeah.
that affects it also because
the big loan that we went for through the state, 1.75 million, encompasses both the headworks and the pump stations. And so the headworks portion we're going to do is like a part 1 and pump stations is part 2. And we're going to incorporate kind of the recommendations that came out of GHD, some recommendations from Inframark, GMB's involved in that. And so we're going to kind of collectively come together. Obviously, we're trying to split them out so there's not so in this day and age when you deal with supply chain issues, we'll do the headworks, get that out to bid, and then work on pump stations. In the pump station piece, we can add and encompass all of these things into that. Obviously, it gets more and more expensive, just how the way the land is, but these are things that we're discussing. Rich, good.
And just to help GHD in regards to prioritizing, one of the, there has been some developments as far as what the ability of the pumps are and where they are as far as stage of life that has degraded since they were on site to do that survey. So I just wanted to mention that the pumps are deteriorating since they were on site to actually see that at Station 3, which has prompted us to do further exploration with the bypass, especially having Sprig come out and do that potholing for due diligence as far as being able to secure the ability to do any further repairs, as the valves inside of that station are also at a state of not being usable to isolate. So I just wanted to make that.
Good point. Time's not helping us.
And we put it in for rotating assemblies, and the rotating assemblies are a good way of putting a cast on an existing issue. And we procured 3 of those, so there's redundancy there as well.
But if we were going to replace it, what would be the cost of that?
That's what's being
Is that-
discussed. It would be a similar to like I believe it's STH, one lift.
That include purchasing land? So we're expecting them,
Well, we don't know right now where we put it.
yeah.
I mean, it could, Charlie O'Donnell. Yeah, we just got material costs and installation costs for a pump station, but we don't know 100% where. It could go right where the one is now and utilize the bypass that we're going to talk about later too in the meantime, or it could go right beside it, sort of to the west side of the existing pump station. But I mean, so early on, we really haven't determined.
But to get it out of the road, we're going to have to go on private property.
Well, the existing station already is. So, yeah, so.
That wouldn't be big enough for, if we moved the whole thing there, I guess.
Well,
unless we made submersible pumps or something.
yeah, they would definitely be submersible
Sure.
pumps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And, we just haven't analyzed it
Sure.
enough. We can maybe utilize the existing footprint of the pump station and put it right where it is right now, and bypass in the meantime, or we could stick it right beside it. If that were the case, then we'd really have to talk to the property owner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Charlie.
So to answer the question about the prioritization, the one issue that we did see that was pretty prevalent with LS5 that as a utility owner, I would be concerned about is the wiring. When you took off the manhole cover, down in the wet well, the wiring was open to it wasn't really in a box. It wasn't sealed. It didn't look like what we would typically see in an installation here. I mean, that's supposed to be, all that wiring is supposed to be explosion proof, those connections. So I would be taking a look at that if I was the BPW, because there will be issues there with regards this box, and you can see these are wire nuts on this wiring here. That's not explosion proof. That's by far not explosion proof. So that's a concern that we would be looking at quickly.
Any other questions for GHD?
I just had a good question about the 35% contingency fee versus what their costs are now. I mean, what's today's cost?
I'll tell you, the 2 pumps for 3 with the valves was 71. If I can remember, 70 to 80,000, and that was 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah, but no,
For a comparable
same methodology. So you'd still be putting 2 sets, a set of grinders. But we kind of get in this. That's why the rotating assemblies with the T8 and the bypass valving gets us to a point where it's kind of the catalyst on decision making, right? It's either, you're going to replace the existing pipes, line the wet well, you have the bypass valving in place, or the ultimate goal would be to relocate the existing wet well.
Any other questions?
I think I missed it. What was the cost of the SCADA? Did you have that? You had that in the numbers, right? For the study?
No, we haven't come up with a cost for that yet.
Okay.
We haven't provided a cost for upgrades or actually to do the study either, but it's just something we would recommend.
Is there a ballpark?
Yeah.
put in?
I think we would have to, it really is there's a lot of questions involved in developing pricing for that would need to be done and sat down with the BPW to talk about what that system is going to look like in the future. And after that, there could be cost developed.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the things we did, and that's signaling over at Josh, because I didn't know what he had, because we recently redid the SCADA at the wastewater treatment plant, and we actually redid the SCADA at the well field. At the well field, it allows all of our guys, if they're on call, they can view turn pumps on, turn pumps off. The wastewater treatment plant, I believe they can see everything in the wastewater treatment plant, but then you have to tie in the pump stations. So that would be, you would probably have more in the cost of hardwiring everything in.
If I had to take a rough guess, Keystone probably quote us somewhere between, I wouldn't hold me to this, but I would say somewhere right around 25, maybe 35, depending on how many lift stations we will create.
I'd say 75 to 100.
All in.
I had a little bit of contingency.
And that's for all 20,
30,
whatever
30,
pump stations.
32, yeah, something.
I think we're right around 20 for just the plant. They had to rebuild every one of the, it's a proprietary system. They had to rebuild every screen.
But I will tell you that, and this kind of alluded to in this, is that if you change it, right, and that is like your new standard, when developments come online, those pump stations are built to those standards. So if you're adding a flow meter and a check valve, those things get added in. Same thing with if you're putting a SCADA system in, it gets added in.
And it would also give us more commonality of inventory than we have now, which is kind of hit or miss.
I mean, Charlie, how many one lifts do we have right now? Hauling Cove? It will be 4.
Tower Hill and Waterfront Preserve. Yeah, and that 1.5 that I quoted before was a one lift as well. You know, these guys are right. I would love to for the board to have a better SCADA system at the pump stations. You've upgraded your SCADA, which was already a good system down at the wastewater plant. And you'd have to do SCADA at each of the 25 pump stations. But the biggest part of it is getting the signal back to the wastewater plant. When we did it years ago, when the water treatment facility was down on Schley Avenue, and we interconnected SCADA-wise the well field to the water treatment plant, it wasn't that big of a deal. We just put a repeater up on the elevated storage tank, and the signal was able to bounce back and get to the water treatment plant down on Schley. But when you have 25 different stations all around the town, I think that's what Tom and Jeff are alluding to, that, you know, it's going to take a little bit of work to figure out how all those signals are going to make their way back to the treatment plant so these guys can operate with them.
Go ahead, Josh.
So we were hitting around the idea of running fiber to, if not every one of them, at least select the main stations. And then we could do some form of small scale SCADA from lift station back to one of the lift stations that have the fiber, and then backhaul it over a hard line that way. That was entertained some time ago, but obviously cost, budgeting, and just cost.
And IoT is just out of the question. I mean, has that been explored, Internet of Things?
Well, you have the same problem, is you have to be able to access Verizon, AT&T, whoever, you know, the carrier is.
I would say that point watch would probably be a very good redundancy and remain, and keep that in place. However, I would prefer to do backhaul over a hard line every day of the week.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you guys very much. So next step from here is,
I would say digest it.
And lay out the options.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you very much,
Good work.
Jeff.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Tom did all the hard work.
Okay, moving on. Well, actually, I think we've got a new item on the agenda, right? 9.
Yes.
Yeah. I've got an IT problem. My printer is still not,
But Nick,
what's,
Old Town.
which is 9 now? Oh, Old Town White Pond. So Austin,
so I think Josh is trying to bring Nick Hammonds in, but just to kind of give a little backstory. So currently where it stands right now, we had an initial kind of kickoff meeting and what's being worked on is you have the DA and in this developers agreement. And in this case, both the city and the board are involved in the developers agreement, both entities. And obviously the developer itself. So we're working through that process. Nick will be best to kind of explain, why he's putting this in front of us. But essentially what it is to post a good faith escrow, just because of the times and how, lead times on transformers are anywhere from 26 to 34 weeks, and that's on a good day. Materials, curb stops, all that stuff takes a lot of time. And so I think in this circumstance, being able to review materials, shop drawings, et cetera, kind of ahead of the developers agreement being executed, I think is the idea behind it, but I'll let kind of Nick take over.
Sure. Thanks, Austin. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, so Austin pretty well hit the nail on the head. We are under contract to purchase the property that Old Town will ultimately be developed on. And we held I'll say pre-construction meeting with Lewis Board of Public Works, as well as the city and GMB to understand a number of things that we would need to start construction. And one request that we had was for the Board of Public Works and GMB to start reviewing our submittals. And we're ready, or we're very close to ready to start making submittals for sewer and water, and hope to be ready to make them for electric here pretty soon. And what's driving that is really twofold, as Austin said. One is cost, as I think it's been talked about some in this meeting already. Costs are going up on a daily basis, and so we'd like to get our materials ordered yesterday, if possible, such that we're not subject to any more cost increases. And then 2, timing. I don't anticipate any lead time issues for things like pipe, but I do anticipate significant lead time issues for things like transformers. So really, we're at a point where we don't have the developers agreement signed yet. And I know there's once, I get it finalized with Austin and Mike Hoffman and Glenn or whomever else has to review it on the city's behalf. There are formal meetings that have to happen, and that, I believe, is the mechanism that the city and BPW need to establish our escrow or deposit for payment of GMB's time in reviewing the submittal. So what I've asked, or what I'm asking, is that we be allowed to post a good faith deposit of sorts, or temporary escrow, whatever you'd like to call it, with the understanding that the developers agreement we've taken a first pass through it. It's not the first time that I've been through this with the Board of Public Works, and we've worked together and I hope trust each other. And so I'm asking that we are able to post a good faith escrow or temporary escrow now, such that GMB and BPW can begin review of our submittals, so we can get materials ordered in advance of having the developers agreement signed and approved by all parties. So that is our request.
Are you talking about an escrow amount that we would have a pot of money to work from that you would never exceed? I mean, I would feel most confident if the pot was big enough that we never get behind.
Well, I mean, I think ultimately there are numbers that, and I don't recall, even though I just read the developers agreement not too long ago, but I think there are numbers that we need to post in the agreement. I mean, my hope would be to post something based on an estimate that Austin and his team and or Charlie and his team are comfortable with for review of submittals, but not, the entire inspection escrow at this point.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just if I can ask a question, Nick, this is Mike Hoffman. So you're just looking to have GMB and the BPW do reviews. You're not looking to start any work out there, right?
That's correct. We won't own the land until the second half of July. I'm just really trying to, have my site work contractor be able to submit that, get all of their submittals in and reviewed as quickly as possible so we can order those materials to avoid any more cost increases.
Right. And so effectively what's being requested is that in order for GMB and the BPW to review so that Nick and his team can order materials, they want to do that as opposed to waiting for the agreement. The agreement itself, as Nick pointed out, does include an escrow requirement that you have to escrow money. And when it gets below a certain level, you have to re-up, and that's how reviews cover. So whatever's posted would be an estimated amount to cover that initial review. But the point is that, and I think we're the board to do this, the board should be clear that there would be no work that would begin until the development agreement is signed. And so then we are literally just talking about those initial reviews.
In the past, we've had some problems with escrows and then exceeding it, and the escrow wasn't remaining enough to cover what they have charged.
Yep. And it's a good point, Press. And I think the difference in this situation versus that situation is that they can't begin work until they execute the development agreement, which would require posting up the escrow and getting it ahead. So there's 2 points. I agree with you. I think the amount should be a reasonable amount to cover whatever you think those estimates are, but the board's protection on the back end.
But if it falls apart before construction ever starts and the whole thing just goes away for some reason, we don't want to be behind on that.
That's right. And I think that the point there would be communicating, and I guess that is the point. If it be the will of the board, you can put a condition that if the escrow runs dry, the review stops.
Everything stops, yeah.
So I would kind of set it up similar to what the existing escrow language is, which I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, it's 50,000 to start, and then once it reaches 25, you have to replenish it. And so in this circumstance, I believe, Charlie, the estimate was like 13,000. Putting in there like 13,000, once it reaches X amount, it has to be replenished to X amount. Like 13,000, once it reaches 2,500, it has to be replenished to 10,000. I don't know how long we're talking about here, and I don't know how quick those fees would come up, but I would think that you would want something similar.
We'd have to just be diligent tracking our expenses versus what's in the escrow.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with Press 100%. We're in very, very uncertain territory in the market right now. And, I know the best of intentions are to develop it, but we all lived through a 2008 downturn and the amount of developments that didn't wind up going in. And I don't want to see BPW getting caught holding the bag for engineering reviews. But other than that,
And this would just be for BPW related reviews. Nothing to do with the city.
I think everything would be utility related.
Just keep in mind, and actually that is a good point though, Press and Nick, to the extent you're not aware, the BPW can only speak for the BPW reviews. So if there is anything on a city side, Anne Marie could, but if there's anything on the city side, that has to go to the city.
Charlie had his hand up too, and we're probably going to say the same things. Typically, the way it goes is that all of the billing goes through BPW because the bulk of the expense is through BPW. And when you're reviewing the infrastructure and inspecting the infrastructure, it's very difficult to separate the time that the engineer's reviewing the stormwater pipes versus the gutter, it all kind of comes together. So for the developments, the billing has been, and the escrow has been held with the BPW.
Right.
So I don't think it would require any specific authorization from the city because the funds are.
But if you're spending money doing things associated with it, we'd have to be tracking that as well as our own spending.
Well, it's any of everything associated with it gets billed to the escrow, which the developer pays. So it's not, I don't want to say it's not broken out, but it's not.
This kind of confusion that you're talking about is
Yeah.
exactly why we do everything through the one entity of the BPW, because it makes it easier for the BPW, the city, the developer, GMB, so that you don't have to keep track of the city, what the city's been paying and what the board's been paying. And he's going to eventually pay for everything. So
Yeah.
Just in terms of structurally, just maybe this will help just to kind of as the board considers this. The trigger point for the BPW in terms of when you must have a development agreement in place is before you do work. So, and that is practice. That is, you cannot do work. And that's why I asked that question. You cannot do work on the site until you have a development agreement. So there's no issue in terms of that as far as what this request is. The question here is the board willing, the board and the city, or how we have this structured, if it's going through the board and the board's controlling the escrow, is the board willing to have G and B incur billing prior to that development agreement in place? I think the risk is well stated by Press and Tom, which is the risk is that GMB does the review, sends the bill, project never goes forward, who pays the bill? And
Right, but I believe the way it works is there's an escrow set up, so the money should be there.
but that,
That's what we're talking about, is how to structure that escrow.
Right, so-
How much and how to replenish. it.
Okay, right.
That-
well,
And that does get tricky. That's been an issue on a few development projects where.
Yes, we're aware.
well, but that's the issue right now, is before the development agreement is in place, there is no escrow. And so I think the question is solely, I think what the applicant is requesting is they want to post an escrow to do that initial review. I think what the board is saying is, if we're going to do that, then if the escrow runs dry, review stops unless it's replenished.
Well, again, there's a time delay from the time Charlie does his work and bills us, and we have it in our hands. And if he's doing more work than we realize, we don't want that to outrun the money in that pot. That's what I'm trying to say.
Which goes back to.
If it
the
never goes to
Austin
construction, the construction never happens. We want to make sure we have it during that.
Yeah, which goes
Period.
back to what Austin was proposing, is that there be a trigger point, not zero,
Right.
but
Yeah.
zero
Right.
plus something.
If there's 10%,
Yes.
once you get down to where 10% of the initial amount is,
That's too small. I think
That's
that's
too
too
small?
small. I think,
Okay.
I mean, if I may, I'm not sure the $13,000 estimate that was referenced, if that is for submittals, I'm happy to place double that in the escrow, and with the hopes that it doesn't get to that point. But if that's double the estimate, hopefully that gives more than enough comfort to everyone that it won't be exceeded, especially if another control is put in place where, GMB says, okay, we're within 25% of the amount in the escrow.
And anything that was left in the escrow when the developers agreement would be formed,
I know.
would just roll forward.
Correct.
It will work if they have enough escrow, yeah.
How many dollars are we really talking about here?
That's the wrong one.
So what Nick is proposing seems reasonable to me, because my $13,000 estimate was conservative. So he's talking about actually putting 26 in there, and then also having the re-up clause in the escrow agreement, so that if it got down to whatever the decided upon point is, he'd replenish it. I don't think we'll get anywhere near 26. So the 13 was a conservative estimate.
We don't almost have to tell you, you've got $10,000 to spend. So that you didn't spend 25 or, that the target you're working within says that you
Yeah.
didn't put together enough more work than you thought, and it exceeds the pot
Yeah.
that we have.
Yeah, and if Nick were to put up 26,000,
Mhm.
we've never done shop drawing reviews for any development that got anywhere near
Okay.
26,000.
If I could just make a suggestion, because the tough thing about here is even if you have a replenishment, I mean, the practical reality is there's an enforcement issue, because what you're doing here is that they're going to post in order to go with the review to force somebody in a situation that you're talking about press is not practical. But what is practical and what makes sense is to set it at a number that would cover the review for the submittals and comfortable with that. And then the onus is on Charlie to tell us if you're running up if you're getting below 10,000 or getting to the point, then stop review and have the applicant come back and then put more.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I think that I wouldn't do it as a rolling basis. I would approve what they are asking for. Should this be the will of the board, approve what they're asking for. Charlie, tell us if it gets to a point where that is out, and then you pencils down and then come back for more. And again, that's also a good check-in point. So the goal here is just to get us to development agreement anyway. And to that point, the applicant has completed a review. It is currently on my desk. My goal is to work with the applicant to get something to the board in July, assuming that the parties can work together and get to that point at the July meeting. So that's what we're talking about.
And I'll add, Kim manages all of our escrows to date. Tower Hill, Lewis Waterfront Preserve, you name it, she's done it. So she makes sure that everybody.
And I do
Pays
send
up.
out emails every month to update their account unless they specify otherwise. Like with Vantage Point Retirement, they want it quarterly unless they go below the credit.
What happens after approval of the shop drawings for this phase? As soon as a shop drawing for item X is approved, is the developer going to authorize the contractor to place the order and incur their own costs? And is there any, and then what happens? The project doesn't go forward. Who owns the?
That would be on the developer. That's the risk that they take in terms of placing that.
Okay, but there's no risk of material being ordered, delivered, and who owns that material, which was permitted absent the developer agreement. But was authorized in effect by the shop drawing approval.
So the developer owns that. That is the burdens on them. The way the development agreement is drafted is that the developer is responsible for. Again, we're reviewing it, but the typical development agreement is drafted where the developer is responsible for constructing the improvements. The BPW will inspect. Once it's approved, inspected, then the BPW will accept. But we don't accept the improvements. We don't accept the work until after it's been installed and inspected.
And so there's no further risk to BPW of the shop drawings having been approved, which triggered the release of ordering material that now doesn't come to the job because the job didn't go forward because there wasn't a developer's agreement or whatever else happened.
That's right. What I will say is, Richard, you just built a very good record against any reliance on the board's action to create that expectation. But that's correct. The expectation is, and there is no reasonable reliance that the board taking this action shifts any burden. That burden remains with the developer. The only thing we're talking about here today is the BPW's reluctance, rightfully so, I think, to incur costs in reviewing before there's an escrow in place. And the applicant has come forward with a solution to that by being willing to present money in escrow to allow that review to take place prior to the development agreement. That is all we're talking about here. Nothing the board is doing today should be read as any reliance that if you order the materials, we are guaranteeing anything, because we're certainly not.
And I think the applicant has been, the combination, the conservatism that GMB is putting in, and that the applicant is willing to double that amount, covers us with Kim's oversight from, any risk of overages.
Yeah. If that contingency that they can't do any work without the full agreement being signed. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with, especially when Charlie says he never saw one that go that high. I'm comfortable with it.
Yes.
Motion to,
I'll make a motion to accept the escrow at, what is it, Charlie? Was it 26,000?
That's what they suggested, yeah.
Yeah. With the contingencies and as discussed by Michael Hoffman.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate the consideration. Very helpful.
Thank
Lots
you.
of luck in the
Thanks.
market.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Next item is item 10. It's the potential of a line of credit from Fulton Bank. Kim, you're up.
Austin and I have been pursuing a line of credit, and we did go with Fulton. We had our operating account with them. They gave us a few different proposals, so I just wanted to go through them and we can start discussing and breaking them down. Proposal number one is an unsecured line of credit for $3 million. This is using SOFR plus 2%, and currently that's at 3.5%. This does have a one-time fee of 10 basis points, which is $3,000. And if we tap into that, that is expected to be a short-term expense to be paid back within 12 months. And they're just going to be billing the interest only, and whatever we can make above and beyond that would go to the principal.
To add to that is if you do a more drastic expense, you have the ability to term it out. They would discuss terming it out in a loan. You basically have annual reviews with Fulton Bank. And if you hold a balance or you have a large expense, they allow you to term it out into a loan.
Correct. And that interest rate will increase than the rate that we have for the line of credit.
Do you have any sense or information that the plus 2% is like
Like a standard?
standard or fair?
I do not, but I can.
That was
search
one of, when Richard and I went over it, that was one of my questions.
Have we had the auditors look at this to give us any unintended consequences?
No.
Okay.
Our proposal for number 2 is a secured line of credit, which is up to 7 million. This would mean we have to transfer our UBS assets to Fulton to have that collateral. And this would be the prime minus 1.25 is our rate, which is comparable to the unsecured line of credit. It's 65% of the investments is what you can get a loan up to, and they did round it up for us. There is no bank fee for this, and it's the same kind of billing, interest only, above and beyond would go to principal. So you can only do either one or two. You can't do both. And number 3 is the equipment line of credit. And this is like a traditional loan, which will be termed out 3, 5, or 7 years based on the useful life of the equipment. And this is based on Bloomberg plus 2%, which for 7 years is currently 5.58%. This does have a 10 basis points fee per draw. So if we were to use the whole 2.5 million, that's $2,500.
So none of these examples have anything that we pay in advance or that we pay just to have this online. This is only when we take the money.
Just option.
For the unsecured
Mhm.
is, you have to pay that right up front,
One time.
one time. And
Option
then
one.
One
There
time
is
when you
nothing.
use it or one time when you
as soon as we
have it
sign the
set up?
papers that we want to open up this line of credit, we need to pay that $3,000.
But no fees exist if it sits there.
And there's no time limit for extending it or
It just stays open.
There's nothing urgent about this, right?
No, it's just a
Because I'm
additional,
thinking you're getting ready to kick off the finance committee. And to me, this is something the finance committee and Earl, I was thinking of Mike specifically, he would dig into this and compare the options. And tell us.
You also have Jack on the CPA side of it as well.
Really, this came out of discussions on the mitigation side because, you know, when you talk about resiliency, when you have a reserve fund that's 10 million and a hurricane hits you, $10 million only gets you so far. This essentially makes you more flexible. It allows you to be flexible when you have issues that come up. And when they view on the equipment side, the equipment can be backhoes, it can be trucks, it could be pumps, it could be anything that you basically can depreciate or create an asset in. So I think the purpose behind it was to be more agile in a market in which, you know, when you budget for something, you know, nothing goes as planned in today's, you know, realm. Accidents happen, you know, pipes break, and this allows you to say, you know, if it's not budgeted in capital, you're allowed, you know, you can utilize it. So I think that's kind of the basis behind how we got to where we are.
and on that second page, there is additional information. Like Austin said, that you can term out if we go beyond that 12 months. And there is the attorney fees for the document preparation. And they said that they've never seen it above $5,000, that it shouldn't exceed 5,000.
Is it fair to assume that Fulton is cheaper than UBS when it comes to managing money?
So they have
provided a proposal.
they have provided a pricing model to compare what we pay now and what they are offering, and they are cheaper.
They're
Materially.
cheaper, but the question would be,
That is-
what's their management
their products,
experience?
yeah. Who is cheaper, Fulton? Fulton's cheaper.
Fulton.
Yeah.
But that would be my suggestion, since you're kicking off this, why not use this as a,
I mean, if time isn't
Run it through
critical
that.
right now, I mean, I think we probably want to ask them to do it within a certain time frame, because obviously we're going into hurricane season, we're going into disasters. It'd be nice to have this lined up in the next couple of months.
Your thought was exactly how mine is.
And Fulton has made it known that they will gladly come and present.
Yeah. In a much larger scale, we tried to
Yeah.
keep this as kind of like as low level as you can get, because once you start talking about, like, if you want the secured and you're talking about moving, then you're talking 457, defined benefits, your UBS, like the actual reserve account. It's a much different scale.
Richard, you think the timing of getting the committee up and running would
Well,
be,
the timing, this would be part of the, I had looked at this as that it seemed reasonable for the option 1 and option 3 to put in place, to have the money available sooner than later. And on the surface, the rates appeared to be reasonable, and to wait and run it through the committee and get additional options and review seemed like overkill for these two proposals. because we have not yet met. We wanted to get the approval of the policies, which should happen today. And then that triggers, okay, we've got the documents to look at. And now we have a reason to meet together for the first time, get priorities, and start our review process.
I guess I don't see the urgency.
I guess because that's assuming that these three are the only options that would be viable versus, with the committee would come up with some other alternatives or, is the $3 million really enough? So I think I agree with Press. I mean, it's from the perspective of if the review can be done in the next 2 months to come back, then, because how long will it take to actually implement this?
It depends. If it's the unsecured, it'll just be the paperwork and signing it and the funds will be available. If it's a secured, then we have to transfer everything. And they said that would be dependent on UBS.
Yeah, not the secured obviously would be, yeah. But the equipment loan, that will also be just a matter of.
Signing paperwork.
So if we can get the review done in the next 2 months and a recommendation back from the finance committee, I'd feel more comfortable.
Okay. And is Austin, you and Kim okay if it takes 2 months to finalize this? There's
okay
not
with it,
the
yeah.
urgency with the finances?
No, I mean, we had to move some from UBS just because of the projects that are going on from the reserve account to the operations. But, it's nothing that isn't out of the ordinary.
And that's coming to an end here now, as far as
Should be
the
in the
big
next,
projects.
yeah, month or two.
Yeah.
And I
But
do think.
one of the reasons for this was especially number one, well, 1 and 3 rather, that we talked about. One of the reasons for it was the cash reserve policy. And with all these things coming up, running up against it. So you say urgency, it depends if you already started moving money to satisfy the cash reserve policy. I guess we should be real careful about how much more money we have to be moving. In other words, does it make any sense to take something out of investment is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, so, I mean, we had to
Yeah.
move from the investment account with UBS into the
Yeah.
operations account. Just to satisfy, because you have Mumford and Miller's project, you have
Mhm.
Teal's project on Powell Town Road. I mean,
They're coming in
outstanding.
heavy.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about $1 million this month in
So
outstanding.
we're running up against it in
It's-
terms of
It's a
cash
heavy
reserve.
season. Usually the summer isn't a heavy season because it's pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you have any equipment that you're looking to buy in the near term?
On this agenda, you have a line in the near term, that's allocating a PO. We already have an outstanding PO for the bucket truck, but that's not looking to be built until the spring of 23. The truck that's on here, which is the line truck, wouldn't be built till the summer of 24. So, but they
It's the other
deem,
production spot.
but they deem equipment is identified as, it can be a pump for a pump station. It could be pumps for a pump station. So there's a little bit of freeway there.
So if you got number 1, there's no upfront cost whatsoever.
Number one
Well,
is
number one
3,000,
is-
10 basis points.
Number 1's $3,000.
And the only reason we did Fulton is because we hold all of our operations account is with Fulton.
And personally, if you think that we're gonna be transferring stuff, looking at these fees, the difference in fees, then I think it would be silly to do the unsecured, pay those fees, and then have to pay another document fee for the secured.
That's saying if you were thinking about doing secured over unsecured.
So what's the will of the board?
Either way, just so you know, board acts via motion. So there's either a motion to refer it to the finance committee or there's a motion to approve whatever. I think I would entertain a motion and then discuss.
Motion.
Well, I'll move that we refer to the finance committee evaluation. And with the hopes that it's done in a reasonable period of time. I don't want to hold things up.
We
I
have a
think 2
second?
months.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's just, that's,
Is there a second to that?
I struggle with it. I do think the finance committee is a great place to put this, given some of the talent that we have in there. The only issue is there's some issue between now and then. And I don't know how long it's gonna take to get those guys put together, to be honest with you. That's my only concern in waiting.
So technically, you can't discuss
I know.
until it'll either fail for lack of a second, or you could second it for
No one said
discussion.
anything for a while, so I
and
said
then
All right, I guess the motion fails. Have an alternate motion? Oh, I guess, can we have a discussion now in between?
you can always discuss until it's time to take a motion.
So if Hurricane Beto hits 4th of July and we need the money, we could always come back and exercise option 1 immediately without the finance committee. So from the concern over crisis management,
Yeah.
we can, as a board, just go and decide to change our decision. So we do have breathing room from that perspective, and that would give us the benefit still of putting it to finance committee, getting the finance committee to give us better feedback, knowing that we have this backstop.
I don't disagree with anything you said other than if I was an underwriter, I wouldn't give you a bunch of money after you just had a hurricane. That's all I'm saying. But having said that, there is logic to that. If in fact we had an emergency, could we go and is this still available? Or does this cost of capital go up?
All right, so we wait for the hurricane forecast. And the hurricane is 30 miles.
With our
away,
luck, it's
and
hitting
we
our
call
shores.
Fulton.
But you see what the thought is?
I can tell you from an insurance standpoint, there's 30 days, they won't do anything until everything is over and done with. So,
On my standpoint, I'd like to be proactive instead of reactive to get this in place.
is there any, if we did option 1 and 2, option 3 doesn't have any cost, does it? Or,
Only if you use it,
yeah, so there's no cost to set it up.
correct. Anytime you draw from it.
And we need 300,000 plus for a truck. And so it really is going to cost us $3,000 to set it up. Is there a cost to say we don't need it anymore and cancel it?
Cancel the line of credit?
Yeah.
I would not think so, but I can make sure.
No, what I'm saying, because
Yeah, you just
sometimes
don't
they make,
exercise it. You just don't
sometimes they can't charge a fee if you cancel ahead of, a certain date or whatever. But I would think that
If
for
we don't-
$3,000, just to have it in waiting, both of these two, not the one in the middle. I don't like that one at all anyhow. So to pay $3,000 to have them waiting, ready to go, with no extra costs. If you say, well, later on, you don't want anything to do with it, we've got plenty more options or whatever. Especially giving all the work going and running up against the cash reserve policy, which concerns me. We're already running up against the cash reserve policy. You're already taking money out of our investments to deal with it. So I'll make a motion that we take.
Guys, who
One
wants it?
second, before you go.
I'm
before you
sorry.
go there, let's finish discussion.
If,
Oh.
Oh, we're under
I mean, if we're not
discussion, okay.
using it, I don't
Sorry.
see why we would cancel it because we don't have fees.
It'd be really easy to move back.
So
Banks.
let me ask you, if we do what Tom was just suggesting, does the fact that we have this $3 million line of credit foreclose other options because we now have a line of credit outstanding?
Like with the state
Well,
or,
with going to another bank,
That's why I said
choosing
we've got to
other
talk to the
options.
auditors. That has to happen in this process.
I did talk to some DMEC members and they have not had any issues and they don't foresee any issues.
Theirs a
With-
little bit harder than ours.
And if anything, one person actually said that it might actually look better that we have this debt that we can use that we're not using.
no, I was just thinking about, like when a credit report, they look at how much potential you have, lines of credit,
Mhm.
and that goes towards your credit rating. And so if we went to, we decided that the finance committee had looked at it, we have this in place and wanted to go look at other options, would having a $3 million line of credit be a detriment for doing that?
No one else has had issues with it. And just like if you pull your credit that you have $10 million that you can spend on a credit card, but you're only using,
I
1
can tell
million.
you, I can tell you what a bank
you're
told
only
me.
using 10%.
If you have a line of credit and you don't use it, it helps your credit report.
Does the city have any lines of credit, any ability?
I don't think we've drawn one, no.
We can loan you some money. if you need.
At a heck of a good interest rate. Okay,
I
anyhow.
mean, the option 3 only charges you if you draw down on it, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
It's essentially $3,000 to have $5.5 million in spending power.
That's equipment, right? Specific.
Well, that plus
But it-
1 and 3.
But equipment is defined in Fulton's terms as anything that you can essentially depreciate and
useful
it's an
life.
asset and it has a useful life.
I could support number 1 with auditors' consent. That's not going to harm us in any way. But I do think very quickly behind that, and that's just because I'm going to walk out in the storms, clouds are going to be, on the horizon. It's pretty cheap for $3,000. And at the end of the day, I do think the finance committee needs to take a deeper dive on it. But auditors would be first.
Okay, so do I hear a motion?
That's not a problem, is it? And what is required? A letter from the auditor saying we looked at this and it's okay, or?
Yeah, if there's no unintended consequences. negative.
Okay, yeah, whatever the,
Yeah.
okay.
We have a motion?
So I make a motion that we do that. That we get the auditor's approval for the 3 million line of credit. And that the finance committee looks at the rest of financing possibilities, including the two other ones that were being proposed.
So when you say the 2 other ones, are you talking about another look at number 1 as well?
I think you're talking about the secured and the equipment line of credit.
Well, or if the 3 million does not look to be enough in the context of looking to have backup financing that can be used and can just sit there ready to be used. There may be 3 more options. Without prejudging.
Can I offer a rephrase, a friendly rephrase, perhaps
course.
to benefit the board? From what it sounds like, Richard, it sounds like the motion is to direct staff to get feedback from the auditors and to refer the question to the finance committee to explore line of credit options and come back with a recommendation to the board. I think is that the motion?
That's what I was thinking.
That's the motion.
But just for clarification, are we saying,
Yeah, it's not what you were saying.
that if the auditor comes back and says there's no problem, that we go ahead with it, or that we wait for another board meeting?
That's why we asked the question, because my understanding is it was being referred, if the motion is So what I would do is I would take it in two motions. If the motion is to approve X contingent on the auditors confirming that that they don't have concerns with it. And then you would have a second motion to refer the question of lines of credit generally to the finance committee. That's one way to do it, if that's what your intention is. If your intention is to get the auditors feedback and the finance committee, that would be, as I said at first. So
That's not what I was hearing.
those are the options.
Because that's what the first motion died on.
Right.
So I think the motion
We want two motions.
was to.
Can I say the same thing and see if I've got it right here?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you
This
just,
could be a potential motion. I don't know. What I thought is that just because bad things can happen tomorrow, let's go out and let's lock in after we get the auditor's approval, lock in number one. However, when the finance committee meets to go over potential of 2 and 3, they also review number one and see if there's any better ways to do it.
So those are the two motions. I would first start with a motion to approve one contingent on staff confirming that the auditors aren't concerned with it. So that's the motion. Does anybody want to make the motion?
Make that motion.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Nailed it.
All right. So then the second motion is to refer to the finance committee evaluation of lines of credit, specifically all three options presented here tonight, and make a recommendation to the board on a path going forward.
And, but also I would include not only I wouldn't limit it to those three options, any other options, including reviewing these and any other options that might make sense.
I think you've got a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nailed it. That was easy. That was me. I was
All kidding aside, by the way, that is the benefit of rephrasing the question so that we do all know what the motion is, because there can be confusion.
Sorry, my computer went to sleep because of all this. So item 11, adding bypass and isolation valving to pump station 3.
So you want to tag team this one, Richard? So essentially, long story short, obviously you had the presentation from GHD. We actually had a meeting on site between Rob and myself, GMB and Richard. We took a look at the area, and this proposal is essentially to add 2 isolation valves and a bypass valve, which would allow you to operate similar to what pump station 4 is and now 9 is, which allows you in the case of an emergency that you would be able to bypass that station, say, the suction lines go down or the pumps go down. Am I missing anything?
And it allows for any work to be done, whether it be a complete remodel or retake of the pump station or to replace the existing pumps as is.
So how does this relate to the conversation we had on, pump station 3, 4, 8, 5, whatever? Is this tied into that conversation?
Somewhat, it's kind of a precursor to it due to the degradation of the pumps and the fact that the isolation valves are not functioning. It limits our ability to repair the present pumps with the new to be purchased rotating assemblies, which would be the Band-Aid or would restore the pumps essentially to buy us time while we come up with a more permanent solution to address that station.
That's a $65,000 Band-Aid.
But you can still utilize that
Yeah.
same setup, no matter if you relocated the wet well or if you kept the existing location.
Correct, because in order to be able to replace the pumps, you still have to be able to isolate the station
And
But we're talking-
presently, we do not have that ability,
I thought we were talking about submersible pumps as a potential.
possibly. And while,
So where
and
would
while
this-
that project would take place, we would be able to isolate and run off of bypass equipment in order to allow that work to take place, because
Well, would
the
this, would
bypass
this
would be-
equipment,
I'm
would
sorry,
this equipment be amenable to that?
yes, because it's outside of.
Yeah, I mean, I would just go along with Richard that these bypasses on the suction side and the force main side are necessary, whether you go with a whole new pump station or you just rehabilitate the existing pump station. So I think it's a good investment, for the 65,000, that's the board's decision, but it's not something that you're going to put in and not use later, even if you went with a whole new pump station.
And it provides security for if there's any failure of that equipment to be able to pump independently of having to do a road closure and shutdown, because that's additional expense that would be incurred.
So if it failed today, you would have to put the bypass in the road, close that single lane, and put your suction line into the manhole, which goes into the wet well, and draw from there and then discharge into a further manhole, correct?
Correct.
How long would this take from today?
From, date of execution to install?
From today? Guesstimate, a
Several
month,
weeks.
a week?
I would say a couple weeks,
Oh, okay.
a couple weeks to a month.
So the materials are seemingly somewhat readily available.
Yeah, there had to have been some investigation before we even
Okay.
got to this point. And then I would say like using Spriggan as an example, put the 2 clean outs on the suction lines of pump station 4, and they also redid all of the internal piping at pump station 9 and added a bypass valve at pump station 9.
So from what we've heard from GHD and also now what you're saying that since they were there, it's gotten worse.
Correct.
Sounds like we're kind of at a critical issue here, and what you're asking to do would be usable even if we change things around and build a new station or whatever.
Correct.
So we're not going to get stuff in there that we're not going to be able to use again.
Correct. It will
Okay.
all be usable and useful
All
in
right.
the future.
Thank you.
And it's
This will all be
readily
done on basically the footprint that we presently use. We're not taking any additional.
Correct. It would be in between the footprint of the building and
road.
the road
And the road.
within the right of way.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
But we would talk to the property owner and coordinate accordingly.
Yes.
because we'll be working with, use some of this property as work area.
And there would be a valve installed, the actual bypass valve would be installed in the driveway.
There would be an isolation valve of the force main installed in the driveway.
Is that in the right of way though?
Yeah, I believe the right of way
So
extends
it's,
past.
so we don't have the permission.
That would all be confirmed before this
Yeah,
happens.
okay. Okay.
Any other discussion?
And I assume we wouldn't take the financing, we would just pay this up front or after, net 30.
Yeah, we would, the 2% finance charge, if
You
it's
talk so
unpaid.
much about borrowing money, that just.
Yeah.
Austin, any bad thoughts on this or?
No, I mean, this is essentially future thinking, because when you install this, it not only adds the layer of being able to, operate in a safe working condition because you're not closing the road, you're not dealing with the Del Dot right away. It sets us up for what we're going to do in the future.
A motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the 65,000 for all the improvements that were mentioned at lift station 3.
I would amend that to 64,900.
And then, or, no,
Because I'm cheap.
on or about 65,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The old power plant building. Item 12 or 13, 12, I'm sorry.
You guys don't need to stay if you don't want to. we've still got a couple items left. So item 12, this came about for several reasons. So we were talking about the battery energy storage project. Obviously, that's kind of on hold in a lull period as it stands right now. But recently, we actually had Lewis and Bloom brought to our attention, there are some degrading aspects of the existing roof back where they occupy. There's a window that's busted. There's a door that doesn't lock. And because of that, obviously, Robin has been trying to get a contractor in here, which is like pulling teeth on a baby. But we really have to come up with what we're going to do because the building is very old. It's going to need work at some point in time. And we just kind of have to have a view on what the end goal is here. Because, you know, you can put a Band-Aid over it, but you're going to come to a point where you're going to have to seriously make a decision on whether or not you're keeping it, whether or not you're renovating it, whatever it may be.
So just so you know, a couple pieces of additional background is that every battery vendor wanted the building demolished. The building is not usable for those type of things. They would prefer to have a clean slate to bring modular battery packs in. Whether the battery project moves forward or not, you know, is anyone's guess. But this goes to an additional item, which is we need to get, and I'm sorry, Anne Marie's not here, the master plan for Schley. Because spending money on a building that we're not going to use makes very little sense. But if there is some adaptive reuse of that building, letting it disintegrate hampers that potential option. So we need to, you know, fish or cut bait here. We put the Schley Avenue master plan, it kind of fell into hold. And we have so many things in the works, and I know you guys do too, the streets building. But we have this empty, I mean, we're using the new old power plant as a warehouse, but the rest of that building, you know, besides the part that Lewis and Bloom uses, is vacant.
But it's in the historic district, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So what restrictions will we have to do things with it? Does that apply to us?
I would say that would be a city decision, but yes, if it's something in the historic district, it would have to go through the process of a demolition or renovation, whatever is determined. But if the way the ordinance is set up for the historic district is, if you're requesting to demo the building, you have to have a plan in place and approved by the historic commission to do it, to before the approval for the demo.
The city does own the land, so.
The only question I would have on that is that the city is exempt from its own ordinances, and that property is all dual titled.
Yeah,
Just to add.
and again,
to
that
the
would be a city attorney decision, but yes, there is a place that's, you know, that's the city's exempt from all their ordinances.
And
I always say that's not a good policy to have. If you're going to make your residents do something, I think
right.
that's just my personal.
And the other part of it is that from, you know, having founded the Historic Architectural Review Board in Phoenixville, you know, looking at that building, you know, there's the old power plant, which is an old building and old architecture. And then the remainder of it is a slip-slop shod of buildings. I mean, the new power plant is a concrete block. Where the water control station is just a bunch of sheds. And I'm not sure of the historical significance of all those add-ons.
That is correct. I mean, again, it is in the historic district.
Right.
Looking at the old map, it's shown that those buildings are non-contributing buildings. So that leads a little bit more towards.
I'm not sure that would be true for the one building, right? That's got the plaque on it from 1903 or whatever that is.
Yeah, that Just looking at the
That's a-
map,
That's a neat old building.
just looking at the map.
Yeah.
On the map it is, but it's probably because of oversight that old building is not.
Yeah.
Now, when the resurvey was done through the process of 7 years, that might have changed. Because University of Delaware, the city got contracted with the University of Delaware, and they came out and resurveyed every property in the historic district. So now,
That might be very well.
so
because
that
I
needs to
did-
be looked at.
When I looked at it, it was 2007, so that was
Correct.
So are
ancient
we,
history.
I think one of my questions was the GHD. Yeah. Mentioned things about doors and so forth. Are there some things that should be done from a safety standpoint or keeping people out? Or are there any improvements that should be made? I mean, not like, let's call them Band-Aid improvements. Like if the door isn't working, do we need to deal with the door? In other words, some of those things that before we can get a plan put together, is there anything we need to do to the place to keep it safe or,
Oh, there's evidently holes in the
The
roof.
hole in the roof.
Yeah, actually, they sent us a picture, one of the areas is the hole in the roof.
okay.
There's a tree growing out of it.
Yeah, well, it's actually it was just a little branch. I actually went inside the building with a contractor a couple of days ago. I finally got a contractor, Bill Fay from Delaware Roofing and Guttering. He said he would come. Had him look at the roof, there's 5 windows on the back of the building. They're 19 by 15 panes.
And which building is that?
The old building.
This is actually,
Original BPW.
yeah, this is the old power plant building.
The one with all the really cool
You can kind of
interior
see-
woodwork.
Trusses, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the back.
Is this part of the original building? Is that part of the original building?
No, I don't think
I
that
don't think so.
was.
It doesn't look like it.
No.
Did he give you any kind of estimates?
He's not returned with an estimate to me. He's got it broke down. I asked him to break it down into 3 or 4 different sections. The roof, the hole, replacing the windows. There's a door there that I don't think they use. There's a door around back. It's just got a padlock on it. But there's another door on the back side of I'd say over the front part, that's really bad.
Okay.
That he's giving me an estimate on that too.
So I guess the point is not to forestall doing, the emergency type repairs, which could be done, as Band-Aids, whether it's tarps or, whatever on the roof, something on the door. But that building is deteriorating. The roofs are old and, that's the door in the back.
Well, I think we should have a plan. I mean, you're right. I think the whole Schley Avenue, where are we going to move here or move that and everything else? What are we going to do? I think it's a good idea.
Any update on potential properties?
I mean, no.
I
No, and I agree with Tom. I think we need to reconvene the talks around the use of master plan for sure. For the park though, you can't see that from the street, so technically you can do what you want. Huh?
Public right away, the trail.
Well, it sounds like what we would end up doing would be better than what's there now. So.
Yeah, but when I spoke with the contractor, there, as you can see on the roof, there's old 3-tab shingles. Again, he's not going to be able to match the color.
No.
But he's going to pull off a section and because again, you can see daylight from the inside of the building through that hole in the roof. But it's not as bad on the inside as it looks like on the outside. But the roof on the back and the doorway on the second picture I sent along is.
Well, windows and stuff. I mean, people can crawl in and out of the thing.
Well, actually, it's secured. The windows, looks like there's a BB hole in one window. One of the windows is cracked. I mean,
Okay.
they're all there, they're in place. And there's one area that looks like they've had a piece of plywood there for years. It's not just been recently done. So it's just now been brought up.
It's historic plywood.
Yeah, correct. It's been there for a while. So
So what's inside? What's inside?
it's the Lewis and Bloom warehouse.
All of what we're talking about
Well,
is,
this area specifically.
okay,
But they'll use a portion of that.
that
How much area. is the cost to fix their area?
We're waiting on that.
Yeah, that's waiting on the calls from the contractor.
But we really, from an insurance standpoint, liability standpoint, if there's any, like a door that you can get in, if you can get into the door without any big deal. My concern would be, for sure, we need to get improvements done on anything from a safety standpoint and letting, people get in there for whatever reason. If we know access you can get in for access, we've got a liability problem.
And not to interrupt, but that area that you're looking at is enclosed in a gate.
Okay.
And so it's not
that's a
just
helpful
wide
thing.
open
All right.
to the public out on the street.
Good.
but is the door now used by Lewis and Bloom? Or is it an emergency egress?
That door there, I think, goes into there's the old office where the water meter is.
Yeah,
And
it's kind
so
of
I don't
like-
think Lewis and Bloom uses that.
No,
Okay, so that could just be sealed off.
actually, that was what I was gonna say is that, from a cheap Band-Aid perspective.
Correct.
You could put a piece of plywood over that door on the inside and just put a little lock on it. It takes a lot of force to open that door.
Fine. No, that would be my
Matter of
only
fact, actually,
concern right
last time
now
I
is
could not open it.
critical things that have to get done and you're right. I mean, if whatever the roof, we don't
The roof,
have to
yes.
match, we can just put.
But we've got to start thinking about it long-term and
Yeah.
it's just rotting. And I don't know if the Star Commission would have an opinion or a feel of that, or do we get them involved even? I don't know whether
What's
that's
the
a good thing
level
or-
of expense that needs board approval? Isn't it $2,500?
What I would tell you is that in this circumstance, I think what we're gonna do is we're waiting to see what the price comes back with to kind of mediate the situation. I don't think it's gonna be that drastic. And then ultimately, this leads into a much larger discussion. And so this is kind of just letting you know, hey, we're starting to see some issues, plan for the future.
But we want to address the health safety issues now because the larger issues have been there for years. And there doesn't seem to be enough of an impetus to gather and figure out, make some progress, some real progress, for whatever reasons, on the bigger issue. So if it's kind of de minimis repairs,
Like, I think Lewis and Bloom does
Yeah,
a lot,
do it.
does a lot for the whole town. So I think if we could help them in some way
Yeah.
that's within a reasonable aspect, I think we should think about it. But I think the longer term play is more important.
I mean, I cannot picture that the cost associated with this is anything more than a couple $1,000. It'd be the high end. And if it is, I'll go out there and do it.
I'll hold the ladder.
Okay.
And I can put the hammer.
Let's make a motion on that.
Not only did we hear you, but so was the recording.
No,
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
it's
that would-
really not that significant of, from a Band-Aid perspective. I mean,
The roof issue is, again, it's the holes, because it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah.
The more it rains, it's just,
Right.
the window issue. I mean,
Under $3,000.
I
We don't have a proposal yet.
yeah, I can't.
If we made a motion to say somewhere under a certain dollar, that we would approve these, changes, knowing that there needs to be a longer term solution, is that acceptable to the team?
I think, yeah.
I hazard to give a number because this is a public session and people will say, well, here, that's how much it costs.
But like 5,000 if you're gonna put a number. The roof is the biggest thing. I mean, I will tell you, there is one sole single green plant where the hole is. One single plant, there's a stem. So
Well, I'll make a mo-
From the
no,
floor?
no, somehow, some way.
I would
I don't know if it was.
Oh,
I don't know if it was-
okay.
So is that a motion?
Go ahead, go ahead.
If you climb it, you'll find the golden goose.
So you're making a motion to five?
I make a motion to go ahead and get the quotes. As long as it's $5,000 or less, we will do the right thing and secure that building, knowing that there's a longer term process that we need to go through.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
But we ought to try to get that study underway.
Master plan.
Master plan.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
There's Anne Marie there.
What do we stand with the master plan at this point? Is it?
There's Anne Marie right there.
Anne Marie just walked back
Oh,
in.
there she is.
Our timing's impeccable.
It was $5,000.
So I was thinking that would be one of the things we talk about tomorrow when we meet.
It's on my agenda.
Oh, and by the way, Anne Marie, where's the sign for the Jones Farm? Everybody keeps saying,
No, we can,
We're waiting
We-
Okay.
on, at this point, they said, what was it, last week, they said it's just about ready.
okay,
And they wanted to know the exact location so that they could get a Miss Utility mark out. And Austin, I was on vacation, so I sent it to Austin and asked him to respond. He responded and said, we'd like to meet on site to
all
be,
three of us.
good.
to be very clear. And she hasn't responded to you yet, right? So that's where it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Austin, you're up.
Oh, you got your thing now? Yeah.
13. Let me just go to it.
As long as we're going to a discussion, my computer.
So 13, this is a simple, it's in the budget, 424. This is a line truck for our electric department. Lead time is 24 weeks plus. So we will have one lineman that I think will be retired by the time that this actually gets delivered. And it's 24 weeks plus. I just want to add that in there. I mean, yeah, 24 months. What the hell am I thinking? 24
Yeah.
months. So two plus years for delivery. And they, yeah.
24 weeks.
Whew. So this is just basically allocating a PO for an item that was budgeted in the 5-year capital budget. I really don't think it's even going to come into the year that it's going to be budgeted for. And I think it was budgeted for a 23, 24, if I can remember.
Isn't this the one with the finance option?
Yes, we have the ability to finance these. One of the things that I will tell you is that when you look at like this sheet and it shows you options, we do not select the detailed options until you're about 6 months or so from the truck being built.
Oh,
So
okay.
you essentially put a number in, they give you a book of options, you wait until you're about 6 weeks out, and then they either come on site or you have a Teams meeting. We just did that for the bucket truck.
So you just want a motion to go ahead and order it?
And this just puts our name in line, we cut a PO and it allocates us in 24 months.
Well, I'll make a motion that we give Austin the authority to go ahead and order the truck.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That was easy, $300,000.
Credit to the city.
Take it from your line of credit.
Yeah, that's right. We got a line of credit.
So, old business, BPW policies. So. Earl, you want to?
No, I got nothing.
You look good.
Everybody have any
Okay,
issues
do we have-
looking through them?
I'll just briefly, pardon?
No, I just didn't know if anybody had any issues looking through them.
Yeah, no, and to that point, I would just say, obviously, last month, we previewed the policies. They were circulated to the board. I did receive some edits and comments from a couple members. I incorporated that and circulated that to everybody. So this is the latest draft document. Just keep in mind, the idea here is that what this is memorializing our existing policies. So to go back to the discussion of last month, there is a discrepancy in terms of overhead and underground electrical wires. And there are some things that have been referred to the Finance Committee in prior workshop discussions. So there are items in terms of once, should the board adopt this, revisiting, refining as the board goes forward, and you have that opportunity to do that. You are not creating inconsistencies by adopting anything here today. This is existing
We're adopting
inconsistencies. Right, you're acknowledging and then refining as you go. There is a resolution, so if the board would like to move forward, just a reminder, it's a two-step motion. First motion is how you want the resolution read, either by title only, or you can have me read the entire thing. I have a preference. The second,
My preference is the second.
If it wasn't so expensive, I would say no.
the second motion would then be to take action on the resolution.
So just before we get there, so do we have a tracking list together to track all the items that we need to go forward? And
Yes, so I have, from the workshop discussion to the other discussion, I have a list of items that the board wanted to revisit, a list of items to the Finance Committee. I think Richard has a list that goes to the Finance Committee, but yes, we do have that list.
I'll make a motion that we start with the reading by title only, resolution by title only.
second,
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Mr. President, members of the board, resolution number 22-00, we have a number. 4. Resolution number 22-004, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Board of Public Works of the City of Lewis establishing a compilation of policies. Mr. President, the resolution 22-004 has been read by title only, placed before the board for its consideration.
Your motion to,
Oh, we have the
Now you
motion
make a
to
motion.
accept it.
yes,
I'll make a motion to accept resolution 22-004.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I gotta thank, everyone, the amount of effort that it took to get to this point was amazing. 100 years. of history.
I will say that goes to Mike's team and Cam.
Yeah, well.
Cam, he's not here. I think, believe he's tested or practicing for his.
I was just gonna say, it's either credit where credit's due. My associate Cam, who is on bar leave right now, studying for the bar exam that he will take later this month. But he did a lot of work on this, as did Austin, the members of the board.
Well,
So
and it has-
certainly
It has to
great.
go back that you were pressing for this too.
Yes.
You thought this was really needed, so you
Yeah.
really probably wouldn't have happened if you didn't push us to do it.
And I appreciate that. And I think the benefit of it is now we have a document. And so when you want to address the electric lines, you have a section that you can look at, you can discuss, and you can refine that. So instead of pulling old resolutions and piecing together, this will be a lot easier for the public to manage, for the board to manage, and I think it'll pay in dividends.
And without having done this, we would never have known that Richard was our bill collector.
Yeah, that's right. So do you need a motion to accept the policies?
No, that was the
That's it.
resolution.
Okay, good.
Okay. Strategic plans. So what's in the packet?
Skip
The
one.
poll.
Skip one.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Which one we at?
15,
attachments.
the poll attachments. Which is 14 in your book.
So this is essentially the agreement or the draft agreement that was brought to you in the last meeting. There were some questions from Richard. They were more questions oriented, which I can sit down and go over with you personally, Richard. But one of the things that was asked in the previous meeting was about any sort of comparable rates and what to add in there for rates. Robin did a little bit of research or tried to do some research. He had a couple of people didn't return his phone call, but he did have some. And I think that will be a good benchmark for what to include going forward. And they're all local munis that are similar to Lewis and the board. It'd be I believe you reach out to Seaford, Middletown, Milford.
Newark. Milford, Seaford, Smyrna, Middletown, Newark, Newcastle,
Yeah.
and not only basically 2 called back.
No, look, he's in a Hall of Fame. That's Hall of Fame numbers.
The only question, and we discussed this the last time, was, is this strong enough relative to the abandoned lines issue? That's a part of the strategic plan, but, it's getting worse and worse. And I would think that a maintenance or nuisance or something else, and it kind of sort of, but there's nothing definitively called out in here. And I think it needs to be more black and white.
There's a section in Article 9 about maintenance and transfers. But it doesn't.
That's on us though. isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's the thing. It's more on what the
BPW.
BPW,
Yeah.
not
Right.
is the maintenance of the utility using the pole. If their line goes down or drops on the ground, when they have to fix it.
Or someone abandoned, drops the service and they
Correct.
just cut it and it falls.
Correct.
And so I'm okay with this as long as we amend it down the line, or
So I'll answer it. So I was actually looked through, I actually remember when I read this before the last meeting, I remember seeing language that addressed that. I just, as I'm sitting here, cannot recall it. But the short answer to your second question is yes. Once you adopt it, you can amend it. And keep in mind that what will happen is that when you get these poll attachments, so this becomes the form. And then if somebody wants to use the form comes back to you to approve before it actually becomes the agreement. And so is it that?
I was gonna say, isn't this similar to like what a developer's agreement would be? Is
Correct.
that this is the benchmark. And then obviously, once you have the benchmark, if somebody comes before us, Comcast, AT&T, whoever it may be, would start with this form and we would work from this form to an agreement, and then that would come before the board.
right, but I mean, this does talk about retroactive existing, agreement going forward. And if we put it in here when we adopt it, does it give us more leverage to get the existing lines that are hanging addressed?
So this would not apply. I mean, I understand what the agreement says. But the bottom line is if the other party doesn't sign this agreement, you're not retroactively applying that to them. So what you do want to do is you want to get a form that becomes consistent though. And so, it does behoove the board that if this is the form and then that's the form that's applied, that it is applied consistently. But between taking the action saying, yes, we are good with this form, then when somebody comes forward, Austin can say, this is the approved upon form. It needs to be approved by the board before it goes into effect. When it comes back to you, you can add in language, you can amend the form, you can do things along those lines.
So what's our current enforcement action against all these?
Whatever their current agreement says.
And, this is something I was gonna bring up tomorrow, because, I mean, this is, a tripping hazard on sidewalks. I mean, I've picked them up out of the street. It's besides the aesthetic aspect. I mean, there's a safety aspect and an aesthetic aspect.
So if you have an existing person that's utilizing the polls or entity that's utilizing the polls, and they would go ahead and sign the updated agreement, does that grandfather the existing polls, or then they would have to?
We can take a look at that. What I would recommend is that to the extent you have concerns on existing lines, reach out to the people whose lines they are and communicate in that way. I think that the idea here to moving over to this form, this is a far more robust agreement than the existing agreements. The benefit of this agreement is that this was produced by DMEC. as a form for DMEC. And so there's some uniformity across municipalities, municipal electric providers. So there's a lot of benefits to this. As far as solving that specific question, again, I think we've got to get everybody switched over, and that some of those questions will go away from there. But in the meantime, I would recommend reaching out to them and talking and saying, we need this fixed.
Is it worthwhile at this point for this form to add that language in there, or if it's not there, or what do you think about that?
So I can take a look. I do recall looking at it previously and walking away with the opinion that there was a hook there. I just can't cite the section as I sit here tonight. I can go back and double check that. And by the time it comes back to actually go in, if the board wants to make that change, we can do that. I just can't do that tonight.
Well, but we could do it on contingent on the fact that you add that to the form and we can pass it tonight, right?
What I would recommend is if it be the will of the board, adopt the form, and then you get into future meeting, you can make a
Oh,
change.
okay,
Or
fine.
I
Any
do
more
have a couple,
questions?
but yeah, I do have a couple of things, Mike. On page 25, it's actually the permit application. It's noted under attention to city building official. It doesn't, there are cases where some stuff will go to the building official when it deals with wireless. But when it doesn't have the wireless provision in the pole attachment stuff, say, i.e. Comcast.
Coax.
Yeah, that won't go to the building official.
So it's a great point, Robin. So this is the BPW form, and so it should go to a BPW employee. The city has its own process and has its own zoning review, which this does not amend, supersede, change in any way. This is purely the BPW's portion. And so this should be the BPW official. I would make it the general manager.
And the other, and I apologize, I know we discussed it, but we have a bunch of Verizon poles in town that we have BPW wires attached to. My house being one.
What are you at? What are you asking?
I don't know what I'm asking.
I
I'm
would,
making an observation.
I would recommend we table that and we can follow up.
Thank you.
So are you just looking for a motion to approve this, or?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr.
Oh, sorry, go
I think I got one more, but it's maybe minor. Page 24, number E. But that's going to correspond also with Exhibit B9 on 33. Going to E, says prior to licensee removing attachments. That's kind of like basic, the prior to, and it references the B9. But on B9, it says, this is to notify you that the licensee's agreement or attachments have been removed. One says prior to, one says have been.
And your problem is?
I think we have a new attorney.
Maybe it's almost like the wording says before they remove stuff, they're supposed to let us know using this form, but the form says we've already removed them.
So we can.
Do we, the thing I guess would be was, do we want to know before they remove them, or do we didn't want to know that they have removed them?
No, I think the idea here is that they have to provide notice before they touch your poles. And so I think the point here is that B9 should say, this is to notify you that licensee's attachments will be removed from the following poles. And then you can identify. So change it to will be.
And costs would be determined when the application were to come forward, because obviously
Correct.
times change.
Yep, that is correct. And obviously their ability to terminate is going to be dictated by the agreement as well. Those are two very good.
Nice
catches.
catch.
And the only question is that, is this supposed to be as building B9 that shows that it was removed or proactive? I mean,
Pardon?
would you suggest, would you said, Mike, makes sense if you want to know before they ever touch your pole versus confirmation that the pole is clean and it has been removed. So, it's whether it's permission to go touch your pole or whether it's an as-built.
Well, and I think E is intended to say, don't go and mess with my poles unless I have notice. And then we will accomplish the following up to make sure it's been removed and the billing. But I think with E saying prior to licensees removing attachments shall notify by sending. So you're providing notification before you do anything. And then that's what B9 does. And then it triggers the other pieces because now you're aware that billing is going to discontinue. And whatnot.
So just playing devil's advocate, because so if they go up on your pole to replace a wire, a line, there's no form that they have to, or is there?
Well, we don't know. I mean, I think that the question there would, I mean, I'm sure there's a maintenance and there's likely notice on maintenance. I don't recall as we
don't-
sit here, but I mean, I think it's the will of the board. It's however you want that D9 to.
Well, and just from a consistency of logic is
Right.
if you want to be known, you want to know when they're going to go up on your pole, then whether they're removing it or replacing it, it's the same thing. Versus if it's only as building for after the fact that there's no attachments on that pole anymore.
I will review that question as well and follow up. But at the very least, my recommendation to the board would be to change B9 to refer to will be as opposed to has been.
And then we would just look for a motion that basically encompasses all changes discussed.
Yep, I've got them over here. So is there anything else, Rob?
Page 21. A1. Maybe it's just me, but in the second sentence there, it says attached by including a drawing made on system maps of the BPW which licensee may purchase from the BPW at a reasonable cost. Is that something, a map that the applicant can supply instead of coming to the BPW, us charging him for a system map, whatever that is?
It would just be a GIS map, right, Josh?
Sorry.
Didn't want to wake you, Jess.
It's basically a map. It's a system-wide map of the electrical system
Yes, I have.
You have that?
I do.
in a GIS form.
I do. I apologize.
Good.
That's fine. I just didn't know if that was something that had to be that detailed. Or if there would have a reason for it to be that detailed.
Is that a problem?
It just would add a step that they would have to contact, they would get this application, they would have to contact, let's say Josh. He'd have to get a map. If we charge him for it, then we'd have to bill him for that. Then they put it on. Could they submit the application with a map that they could supply on their own?
But
Josh could probably answer it better than me, but I would think that if he supplies the map, then there's probably some GIS attributes that would be involved that he can easily locate the pole and any revisions to the pole.
Yeah,
I mean, but he can answer that problem.
that was fine. This the question of trying to move the process along a little bit instead of come first, come back, go. That was just my.
We do have a pretty good GIS and all the assets of the electrical system. It is up for renewal or updating. It was done. Oh gosh, probably and it's.
I would include it. I would include it. It's a benchmark. right? We can always modify it, but as it stands, it would be a benchmark.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like making you use our maps with our GIS
That's fine. I just.
versus us then translating from whatever system they're using.
Are our maps kept up to date?
I was gonna
though?
say something.
Yeah, I update as we put in new infrastructure,
Okay.
for sure.
Good.
Anything that Charlie, not just electric, but water, anything that they provide.
Sure.
We update as well. So anything new, we add, but all the older stuff that needs updating, we are working to update that as well. It's an ongoing process.
Exhibit A actually have the schedule of the fees and the actual amounts.
That's why we just discussed that. It's blank, and then we would incorporate those, because in 5 years, it could be completely different. You go back 5 years from now. I mean, there's one agreement that has the cost being based off, the escalator being based off a cost of a power pole from 1965.
So this is a
So-
form, and then if we put fees in now, 2 years, nobody uses it for 2 years, then we have to redo the fees again. So
That's why I'd mentioned about
Yeah.
it. If you keep it blank, when the
it's a
day that they
blank
come
form, and
forward.
we put the fee in when they come in for the application. Yeah, okay.
And the
You'll see these again when you actually have a request.
Be fairly soon.
And speaking of Exhibit A, it only, again, it just maybe oversight, but it only shows 5 years, but the terms of the agreement on page 9 say it's 10 years.
So, right, so it's whatever is negotiated.
Yeah,
is
if
what
it's a
you-
10-year contract, 5-year contract.
But it's got to be 10 years by what the terms of the agreement says.
Unless there's a different term.
Yeah.
But then does that automatically going to be 10?
No, it will be if there's a different term.
Somehow I find this wildly interesting now. Do we actually charge people if they don't pay us? I mean, how do we manage that today? If they owe us money for this, for the pole attachments.
So why don't we put that one on ice as well?
Okay.
Do I hear any more discussion? I hear a motion.
Make a motion that we approve the pole attachment license agreement.
I can make two friendly amendments. One is and instruct staff to revise page 25 to change city building official to general manager, and change page 24 to replace the words have been with will be as discussed here today.
Yes. Accept it.
Staff, so.
All in favor?
Aye. Last but not least.
Yeah, there's two.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Yeah, it's in yellow. I thought that was struck.
Good try.
So, the strategic plan. So what I did was, and I think people have seen this before, is this was the strategic plan as originally we agreed to. And then I've gone in and annotated the last 2 years with the status. So, and I guess it's for a subject, it's open for discussion now on whether there are things you want to change, want to add, or how to proceed forward.
Are we going to get into all this?
Well,
What was your thoughts? Are we supposed to look at this and get back?
it was agreed that we were going to put it on the agenda this time. If everyone's had a chance to look at it, or if you'd like to defer the discussion to next time.
It's important. It's a really important, and I think at the moment, rather than getting an hour's discussion, it might be worth tabling it.
And it's not critical at this point, but this is kind of the baseline of where I think we're at right now. And we've lived through COVID, which impacted a lot of this stuff. Things have changed with the city for the better. That's been noted. So why don't we table it and we'll put it on next month's
We
agenda?
have it on our annual consideration for March.
Yeah, it's annual. We discussed it in March and then we came through with some,
So are these the changes here?
that's what
That-
Tom.
That's what, yeah.
And at that future meeting, I will still lobby for customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction metrics. I think it's important. It's my annual conversation.
And I did not add anything. I took the old,
As I got it.
Yeah.
As done, yeah.
I was not,
Updated.
So let's make it a goal to review these and have comments for
July.
July.
Mhm.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, now, last and certainly least, I mean, not least,
Oh, thank you.
mitigation committee.
This is our president. Yeah, I found a fifth person to join the team. And it's someone that I.
What is that, number
have known
17?
For many, many years. In fact, he was a project manager for me. He's had 40 years' experience in designing wastewater, water systems and so forth. He's a PE, and I think it'll be good addition to it. His name's Mark Proudy. He recently moved from Wilmington down here. He's in Wolf Point. And I contacted him. He would be pleased to join our committee. I think it'll be a good addition. He has, where many of the people have a lot of environmental background. He has hands-on construction and design and so forth. He'll be a hands-on addition to it, a practical addition to it.
So if you remember the last meeting, we approved the mitigation team. We approved the members with one TBD. And so now press is bringing forth the final member. So we have a motion. I guess we have to have a motion to accept press's recommendation.
I make a motion to accept Press's recommendation.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Now, all right, make a call to the public. We haven't,
There's nothing online.
Oh, you got one.
There we go.
I mean, I have people, but there's.
No, there's Barbara Curtis.
okay, so Bobby Curtis is one of our members of the mitigation team. And
By June 29th.
Oh, yeah.
call to the press. I don't see Andrew.
Speak if she unmutes.
Hi, am I on?
Hey, Barbara.
Hi. Thank you. I was looking at the annual water report and I've been reading about EPA looking at tightening the PFAS regulations, well, not regulations, guidance levels, and wondered if if the BPW analyzes for PFAS compounds in the drinking water. And if you don't, if you have plans for starting that soon.
We actually did. We did it this year. I believe it was in the fall of this year. I want to say it was September, the end of September, we had it tested. And we were well below the standard. We actually posted an article, I believe, in the Cape Gazette after it. I think Sharon
It's
did.
on the website.
Yep, and it's on our website as well.
Oh, great. That's good news. Thank you.
Very welcome. Great question.
Anyone else from the public? And the press is not here. Well,
Aaron is up.
oh, Aaron is on?
Yeah.
First one.
Oh, okay.
He said he's good.
Good.
Okay. All right, then we have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved. Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much.